Hey welders, ready to upgrade your gear and save some serious dough in the process? The Miller Build with Blue savings and rebate program has you covered. Find amazing deals and cashback rebates on a wide range of Miller products, from welders to plasma cutters and everything in between, all backed by our 3-year warranty. Don't let this opportunity pass you by. Take advantage of the Miller Build with Blue program now. Visit us online or stop by your nearest Miller distributor today to start saving.
Okay, here we are at another Strange Motion Way podcast. I'm your host, Tim Strange, along with my co-host that is leaving already.
Carrie Strange.
She decided at the last minute, she's had a couple events that she is wrapping up, so she's like, oh, I'm going to be on it. She decided 10 minutes ago to do her hair and be on here with us. So tonight we have a hot rod builder, race car driver, artist, vintage race car restorer, vintage race car judge. He's restored vintage Indy cars, dirt cars, and some amazing Miller cars, part of the Ohio Flame look with Wade Hughes. He built the crazy Dynamat 32 Ford street rod that it had a name, but what was the name of that?
The Dynaliner coupe.
Oh yeah, the Dynaliner, which
the 1.0.
In my mind, it was the first notable car that was built fresh to look like it was an old. I feel this is a guy that can do anything he puts his mind to, he can accomplish. And maybe he's been kicked out of the Street Rod Nationals for doing donuts in the mud. And maybe, just maybe, he was part of lighting a nitro car in the streets of Bowling Green, Kentucky during Hot Rod Reunion one time.
A little bit.
I think
maybe a few times.
That might have been statute of limitations might be over by now. So welcome.
Yeah,
tonight.
pretty much anything.
Josh Shaw
pretty much
is our guest tonight. So welcome.
Thank you. It's an honor to be on here. And it's just awesome to catch up with some old friends and talk about hot rods. And I've moved up to Michigan now, so I don't run the same circles, but I get to see everyone online and especially Instagram and whatnot. So it works out good.
Yeah, cool. So before we get into the meat and bones of what you're doing now, we like to go way back. I know I've met your dad. You got a super rad dad. It's kind of why you got into hot rods, but I'm sure there's more than just him. Some of you guys have seen his dad's car. He's got a bitchin' Patina 32 Ford truck that usually pulls a vintage dirt track sprint car behind. So let's go back to little Josh. How did you grow up around hot rods, dirt cars, or what?
Definitely. Yeah, Dad was a hot rodder. He was a drag racer. And he was, when I look back in the photo album, he was the type of like greaser, hot rodder type. He didn't have the cigarettes rolled up in his sleeve, but he definitely, had the black slick back hair and always had hot rods. A lot of good cars. He was into gassers and, 409 type cars and 3 or 4 Corvettes. And all the Corvettes had, Ansons and wide tires and the right look. Couple coupes, like 37 Chev coupe, that era. No 32 Ford stuff. That was kind of out of his reach. He grew up in poor. He didn't have a lot of money, but he made it happen. And my mom had 5 brothers. She was the only daughter of 5 brothers. So that's kind of why she's a wild lady. Like she's still to this day, she runs marathons all over the country. She travels the world. She goes 1,000 miles an hour. Wow. And it's a known running joke that all my crazy antics come from her, not my dad. So when we would build ramps, she was the one that would cats. We love cats. My cats will be through here.
Yeah, our cats show up.
But my dad was friends with a bunch of car guys, and my mom's brothers were car guys. So they ended up meeting, and then I came along, myself and my sister. I have an older sister, and it was just a car family from day one. I rode home from the hospital in a 57 Chevy, and that was like on purpose, had to be. And then when I was, from what I'm told, I was like 3 or 4 months old. I was still very little infant. I was at Lawrenceburg Speedway at the sprint car races with headphones on. And then, growing up, when you see the little kids in the stands at the racetrack with the flags waving, that was me. So Lawrenceburg, Indiana was our home track. It was about 40 minutes from where we lived in Cincinnati. And, it was all hot rods and go-karts and the right stuff growing up.
Yeah, that's a pretty historic track to be luckily growing up as your local track right there.
Yeah, it was a bull ring then. It was a quarter-mile dirt track then. They built that track in 1950, and the World Outlaws raced there. Steve Kinzer, Jack Hewitt, all the big names. That was like just one of the tracks you had to be kind of like an Eldora or Kokomo. If you were going to be famous, you better be fast at Lawrenceburg. And it was also one of those tracks where the locals could run with the big boys when they came through, which is kind of something I'm sure you guys even judge in BMX. Like there's certain tracks you go to where even the locals are really fast all the time, and it's like you wonder if it's something in the water, if it's just something about that area. But I think it's just talent good talent creates other good talent, creates other good talent.
Yeah.
And, Lawrenceburg was one of those tracks that
In the
I was
BMX
close
world, it's
to.
Rockford. The Midwest is the Rockford, Illinois track, and of course
Okay.
the famous Orange Y in Southern California. Man, there were so many factory riders that came out of there.
Yeah, isn't that cool how that happens? I like that. I like that. I grew up at Lawrenceburg playing in the dirt there with my buddies, and then eventually ended up racing there. And then the ultimate goal, we won a championship there. I won many features there, but I won a championship there in the year 2000.
Okay,
And
let's go back a little bit. When was little dirtball Josh first behind the wheel of a car? I assume maybe you started in go-karts.
yeah, we had a backyard go-kart that Dad rigged up. That I had a track there in the woods, which thinking back was crazy because it was lined with trees. But I set up an oval, and I remember I knew how to, and I mean, I'm talking like 8 or 9, 10 years old. I knew how to go fill a bucket with water and dump it down in the one corner to make that corner like a slick corner.
Oh, cool.
And then would try to go through there sideways. And I can remember as a little kid just trying to go through there. And I wanted to be able to see my front wheels going back and forth like the sprint cars, and trying to get my left front up in the air and just stuff like that. But that was my childhood, was running that go-kart.
What
And
my
then-
go-kart learned me was it was a weld together learned me. It learned me was the same. I was about 8 years old. We never raced anywhere. It was just we lived in the country and drove it around and everything. And it was heavy as hell. I remember it had like a 8-horse Briggs, which hardly ever ran. And the brake was the belt drum with the belt, with you hit the brake
Yes.
and the belt. And that was always breaking. And I remember my biggest lesson that I learned was I was trying to mess with the carburetor and put gas in it to try to get it to start one day. And I took a styrofoam cup and put gas in it. And by the time I got the styrofoam cup over to the go-kart, it was just a ringer. So then I spent the rest of the day pouring gasoline on every styrofoam thing I could find on the farm. So yeah.
Something to last. Something to work.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good lessons.
Yeah.
That's the kind of lessons you learn when you're a kid getting to play with go-karts and mini bikes and anything mechanical. The lessons you learn there, some are good, some hurt, some last your life. It is what it is. I had that backyard kart, and then when I was 10 years old, my dad was working at the time. He was working construction, driving a semi truck, pulling a lowboy, hauling heavy equipment all over Southern Ohio and Indiana. And he had some coworkers that raced go-karts at a track called West Union, Ohio, which I didn't know it at the time, but now, like looking back, it was probably one of the nicest go-kart tracks in the Midwest. It was really nice. And he set up for us to go watch when I was 9. And what I didn't know is he had arranged for me to take a ride in one of those guys' go-karts. So at the end of the summer when I was 9, we got there, and one of the guys, they asked me, like, do you want to take my go-kart out and ride it? And I was excited, but almost immediately thought, like, I don't have a helmet. I don't have any of that. And my dad had already packed that in the truck. Like, it was all set up, So I got to drive that go-kart around the track. It was the first time on a racetrack, which was awesome. And then that winter, my dad bought a used Margay go-kart, in 1986 Margay Cat, I think it was. And I got that for Christmas, just a used beat up go-kart. But we went racing when I was 10. That would have been in 1986, 87, right in there. And went racing that year, and just, we started racing go-karts, and that was the changed my life in many ways. One of the biggest ways is it immediately was all I wanted to do, all I would think about. my passion, that was it. And my parents knew that. And because of that, they were able to hold that over my head to get good grades.
Yeah.
Because I was a terrible student. I ended up repeating the 7th grade. I just did not like school. I didn't want anything to do with it. But if I didn't get C's or better, I didn't go racing. And there were two different
with BMX racing. I couldn't afford stuff with a motor on it for racing. And we had good friends that we grew up. He BMX'd and stock car raced when their son Dewey was little. The only way they could teach him to learn his numbers and count when he was a little kid was his mom and dad were racing go-karts at that time. He got out of the dirt track cars because go-karts were supposed to be cheaper than they're running 2 classes and all that stuff. But the only way they could teach him to count was Dewey would stack go-kart wheels.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, and he could count to 14, and that was it because that's all the spare wheels they had. I remember that.
Hey, that worked, man. There was 2 different Saturdays I had to sit home because I got bad grades, and it worked. I mean, my mom was a school teacher, so she understood that not all kids, it's not that kids are ignorant or dumb or whatever. It's just some kids don't like school. They don't learn the same way as other kids. We'll get to here in a little bit of how I ended up starting to read books and like being able to like read and do book reports. It all had to do with racing. Everything was racing.
Yeah, what was that 80s movie that he was staying with either his sister or he was the uncle? Was it Uncle Buck or something like that? I don't know. One of them cool 80s movies. And the only way they could teach the kid how to read is they gave him a Playboy. And in the movie, he was like a 10-year-old kid reading Playboys. What's her life savings like? So he learned to read. That was
whatever works.
Yeah.
It got me to get through, it got through to me to get my butt in gear and get better at school. And then the other side of it was during the week, the prep on the go-karts of cleaning them up, getting them ready. So, breaking down tires, getting carts ready. I had to do all that myself or we weren't going racing. And it wasn't that, it wasn't that my dad didn't have time. He just knew like, you're going to have these responsibilities. Here's the list of what needs to be done. And if it's not done by Friday, we're not going racing.
Yeah. I think racing stuff, I mean, I grew up BMX and she grew up coming, her brother raced and cousin. But that type of stuff, like you say, it teaches you a work ethic. It teaches you a drive, an end result. I had to study in school so I could do this. And it teaches you life lessons on traveling, losing, being a good sport, all that type of stuff. And I feel sorry for the kids that just sit at home and whatever they do. But yeah, any racing thing, I think it's just great.
The sports that they don't keep track of anymore, and everybody's a winner.
Oh yeah, the T-ball thing. Trouble when my niece was playing T-ball. I was like, "That's 3 outs. Rotate." And shush. We don't count outs. I said, "I bet you ask every kid out there on the field. They know or they know how many outs are out there." Yeah.
The kids are keeping track. I agree with that too. I support all sports, but I really like sports that are like racing, martial arts, tennis, where it's just you, like you are the only athlete.
Yeah.
I think it'll teach you more because it's all on your shoulders. It teaches
it's not the quarterback's fault on the football team. It's like in BMX, I got beat because I was either out of breath or I got passed in the corner. I left the door open. Yeah.
It's hard to make excuses when you're the only one in the seat.
That's right.
And it taught me deadlines. Deadlines are something we all deal with. And at 8, 9 years old, 10 years old, I knew like this stuff has to be ready by Friday or we're not going racing. So yeah, you might want to go play with your buddies, but there's a deadline here. It's important.
And like we do from back then, do you have any guys that you met at the go-kart track as a little Josh Nugget that you're still buddies with now?
Oh yeah. Joey Kerr.
Yeah,
Joe
there's
Kerr
always somebody that sticks with you from that early stuff.
Joe Kerr Fabrication. He's out of Indianapolis, still building hot rods and amazing fabricating skills and machinist. We're the same age, and I met him probably the first year I started racing go-karts, but really quick, like within the first summer, definitely the second summer. We weren't friends. We were racing against each other, and kind of started as like a rivalry, but it evolved real quick to like we're the two fast kids, and I would talk to him, and we'd be up there looking at the track, and we were the only two kids there that were serious about it, up there staring at the track, trying to figure out how to go faster. The other kids are over, throwing rocks in the lake, and if it was, we didn't have Game Boys and stuff, but it was the mentality of we were the two that were pretty serious about this, and a lot of kids weren't. So we became friends when we were 11, and still friends to this day. All growing up, Joey was my constant buddy forever. And then he was racing go-karts as well. He would go and race the WKA, the World Karting Association, big race at Christmas. And I was lucky enough to go with him and his family to Daytona. So when I was like 12, 13, 14, I wasn't at home for Christmas. We were in Daytona Beach, Florida at the Go-Kart Nationals, which is a racing family thing to do, and to not be at home during Christmas. But
yeah, BMX, Thanksgiving, you go to the Grands in Tulsa.
Yeah.
And back in the NBL days, we'd go to
Ohio.
Columbus,
Christmas classic.
Yeah,
That's right.
Yeah, I've met a lot of guys that tell me in Christmas, they were in Columbus, Ohio at the
Speaking
Christmas
of teammates in go-karts, Carrie used to have a coworker. He's not with him anymore. There was a go-kart racer growing up. And then there may have been a reason that he didn't quite make it as far as his teammate, because the one year he was at the Snake Pit partying, and he posted after the race, he's like, holy crap, my ex-teammate just won the Indy 500. He was go-karts teammates, and the trailer was painted with his name and Alexander Rossi. He was teammates with Rossi. And he goes, there's a reason Rossi is where he's at, because he was always just that much more serious, that much better, more dedication than the rest of them. So
it's neat to, you don't realize that stuff's happening when you're living it, but looking back, it's interesting, because Joey and I were racing go-karts. We were 12, 13 years old. We were friends. We were serious about it. And then along came a girl that was racing at the same track we were racing at. And that girl was pretty fast, and she was serious. And we noticed that she didn't talk to everyone, but we found out pretty quick that it was more like her dad had told her, we're not here to make friends. You're here to race.
No,
and that was
stay away from those boys. That's what
that was it too. That was it. But that turned out that was Sarah Fisher.
Oh, wow.
Cool.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Sarah was right there with Joey and I racing, and
that's cool.
She was a good racer. There was many weekends that it was me, Joey, and Sarah, 1, 2, 3, that would rotate. One week I'd win, one week Joey'd win, one week Sarah would win, and it was cool. Like I said, at the time we didn't know it, but looking back, you could see just the intensity and the seriousness. And then we all, we raced together when we were 15, 16. By the time we were 16, 17, we all started moving on to bigger cars and going in different directions. I went to an open wheel modified. Joey went to a mini sprint and then a sprint car. Sarah went to a wing sprint car and ran the All-Stars. And her family was racing wing sprint cars at Chillicothe Speedway in Chillicothe, Ohio. Her uncle Charlie is an engine builder to this day, who's an awesome follow on Instagram, by the way. Charlie Fisher Engines. It's one of those follows that he shows what goes into building top level World Outlaws sprint car engines.
No, cool.
That whole family, the Fishers, they were big time sprint car racers there in Chillicothe. So it was, we all went our separate ways, but wide off, but we all just kept going up through the ladders. It was cool. It was neat to look back, and then there's Matt Westfall was in there with us. He's a USAC guy right now. He won a USAC feature last year. He was, little kid right in there with us. So, and it's cool to look back through the photo albums and see, who was there. Yeah. And just like the BMX stuff, just some little kid that you don't really pay attention to could be the one.
Yeah, I remember kind of jumping out of order. Good Guys Indy used to be in Indy, right? And then you'd go Friday night, they ran on the oval track. So you get these kind of tickets, and that's the years that Tony Stewart won the 3 championships or whatever. And I was like, holy crap, look at this guy drive. And then we were just fans from him, from then on out. And oh my God, he's racing Indy cars. And now, we're big IndyCar fans. And then NASCAR, drag racing, and yeah, so that when
when Joey and I were racing go-karts when we were like 12, 13 years old, Jeff Gordon was 17, 18 years old.
Mm.
So we were dreaming of being Jeff Gordon.
Mm-hmm.
And we all wanted to take that same path. And Jeff was a big hero to us because he was the first guy in many years that had went from open wheel dirt to the top levels, to NASCAR or Indy. Back in the day, that was the direct route, but it had fallen into the wayside through in the 70s, it started going away. And then through the 80s and 90s, it just wasn't happening where American dirt guys were getting a chance to go to Indy or NASCAR. And Jeff changed that.
This is against popular opinion. We go to the Indy 500 almost every year, like 27 years. I know you don't like the modern Indy cars as much now, but I'm still a fan. Growing up 3 hours away in Illinois.
I'm still a fan. I'm just trying to be a grumpy old racer.
Yeah. But to me, again, this is unpopular opinion. I didn't mind the years of the IndyCar split when the IRL took over because I've seen Steve Kinzer run the Indy 500. That's kind of how Sarah Fisher got in there. And you've seen a lot of those dirt guys. And
Jack Hewitt got to go run it.
Yeah, and Brian Clausen that has since passed away. JJ Yaley, that was cool. My brother-in-law went that year. He's a big dirt track fan. He's like, oh man, it was a rain delay, and we were just walking around looking for trinkets to buy, waiting for to dry. And Kinzer about ran into us, ran around the corner. And it's like, as dirt track fans, it was pretty cool to see that again. Oh, yeah. The dirt guys back at the Motor Speedway. So I
agree 100%. I agree with that. And the way to that angle, you got Jeff that kind of broke down the door, and then Tony came through and just set the door on fire and got rid of it. Because Tony was, Stewart came through, went to Indy, was an Indiana boy. And I think not only did he do good because he was so talented, but as you know, talent only does so much. The sponsors and the people that were in charge saw how much fan base got behind an Indiana boy coming from the dirt tracks and going and running Indy.
Yeah.
And, and all of a sudden Menards and T-shirts are selling off the shelves.
Yeah.
And I think the sponsors in IRL and all of them that were running things said we should kind of pay attention to this. Yeah. And then they should get credit. They did good.
Yeah. One of my favorite racing car drivers of all time is AJ Foyt.
Yes.
And, because he could do everything. And to me, Tony is an AJ Foyt. And today's version of that, to me, is Kyle Larson. He just put him in something he's going to drive. It was very good for the Indy 500 for having him there. He's going back next year. He missed a pit stop. Yeah, so I like those guys that drive anything. So
that's the epitome of a top level race car, guys. There's two things that you can really judge a good driver on in any form of racing is, can he jump in any form of racing and be fast, which Foyt could, Larson could, Stewart could. And then the other one is, can he jump in a piece of junk and be fast? And because there's a lot of racers that, they get top level equipment their whole career and they're fast, but we never got to see them struggle in I won't say an SHIT box, but that's like the term.
Yeah, you can say
crap box race car. A guy like Rich Vogler is one of my favorite drivers of all time because Rich was good at taking a crap box race car and winning with it. So, and Foyt had to do that. And Stewart, didn't always have the top level rides. And Larson's been very lucky, but I've seen Larson in cars that were middle of the pack cars, and he jumps in it and sets fast time and wins. That's good it's a good rule to judge drivers on. Can they take a middle of the pack car and win with it?
And bring it
because that's on them, know.
And you still got to finish the race.
Yeah. Oh yeah, exactly. Okay,
so let's get back onto you. We talked about all this race car. We jump around sometimes. It's like
trust me, I'm gonna do the same thing. I don't mind.
Yeah, I've not been diagnosed with ADHD or whatever that is, but it's pretty obvious that that's me.
Same.
But
Same.
Okay, you're racing dirt cars now. Still in high school at this time?
Correct. Yeah, I was in high school. I was running them dirt modified all through high school. But along that same time, Dad had hot rods. It should be mentioned that we still had hot rods at home. Dad had a 57 Chevy. And when we discuss the hot rod lineage story, it's going to start with that 57 Chevy. I had a
At this
55
time,
sedan
what was
delivery,
your first daily driver? You want to
an
guess?
S10.
That's what I was going to guess. I was going to guess a square body S10.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
an S10. My dad, I knew I wanted a mini truck because mini trucks were big,
Mhm.
and you know as well as anyone, I'm a huge mini truck fan.
Yeah.
Built a bunch of them.
And you
Learned.
can haul race car parts in them.
Oh yeah, yeah, and I learned so much of my fabricating and suspension and like design skills from building mini trucks.
Mhm.
It part of it. Um, Dad found a slammed S10 that had. Do you remember the chrome Western wheels that were
Mhm.
like just chrome wheels with the circles, like the dot holes in them?
Yep.
It was a slammed S10 with Westerns. The deal was if I could pay half, he would pay half. So it was $3,000. I saved up 1,500. He paid 1,500. We bought it, and I was 15 and a half, so I didn't have my license yet. And it was my truck, but my sister drove me to school in my truck for like half a year.
So that's almost kind of like the same amount of money. My third car, but I had to go to the bank to get a loan. I had cow and pig money because I was a 4-H show guy.
Yeah.
We found a $3,200 64 SS 4-speed 283 car on the way to Cordova for the World Series of drag racing. So I was
Nice.
14. We go back and look at it again the next or Monday morning with money. And then my dad's like, you want this? We're going to have to get a loan for it, right? So I was like, yeah, I had like, I don't know, $1,000, $1,200 or something saved up. And he goes, okay, give me the $1,000. And he goes, I'm not going to help you, but I'm going to co-sign the loan for you. So we go to the small town farmer bank, same bank my dad still banks with his farms, 3,000 people, this non-chain, still not a corporate bank.
Mm-hmm.
And we go in there and, him and the banker had talked and it was like, so he says, you want to use this up? And I go, what are you talking about? He goes, you get one cosign your entire life. He said, if you use this now for this car, not going to help you get a house or a new truck or whatever. I mean, my grandma helped me with my house, but, and I'm like, I'm 14. I didn't think about the future. I'm like, hell yeah, sign the paper. I'm getting a Chevelle. Yeah. 14 years old.
Right now.
Yeah.
Yep. That's cool. That's a good first car, man.
Yeah. It was,
I had,
Midwest summer car because you can't drive them in the wintertime being Midwest. So,
no,
yeah.
no, I learned that with mini trucks. They don't go good in the snow. We're in Southern Ohio, Cincinnati. We got snow, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
I had S10 was my first vehicle to daily drive, but what there was involved with when I was 2 years old, my dad drug a 55 Chevy sedan delivery home and just a roller, and that became mine. That was going to be my first hot rod.
Oh, cool.
So even when I was like 12, 13 years old, I would brag to my buddies, I got a 55 Chev. Now granted, it was like in primer behind the garage, but
my first car I bought was a 55 Chevy 150 baby blue and white.
Oh yeah.
6-cylinder stick for $100 from my great-great-grandpa for selling my 4-H show pig. So that was my first car ever. Drove it around the barnyard and ended up being way too rusty to fix, so we sold it probably when I was 12 maybe. And it ended up being a local guy built it into a Pro Street car and it made Super Chevy magazine. So for my first, it was just too rough to, for my skills at that time. So man, we grew up, my dad still has a bunch of Tri-5s.
My whole childhood was Tri-5s. Dad had 57 Chevys that he was restoring and building. And then I had that 55 sedan delivery, and I was buying parts for it when I was in my early teen years. It was pretty solid. I remember I bought rockers and lower quarters. I bought floorboards for it. It had a perfect one-piece back door because it was a sedan delivery. And it had a really nice rust-free back door. And then this will date it. I was at the Pumpkin Run swap meet one year, and my big purchase was a set of 15-inch Chevy rally wheels that the fronts were 4.5 and the rears were 14-inch because I was going to tub it.
Oh, yeah, you had to Pro Street everything back then. Yeah, right.
Yeah, everything. And then Joey Kerr had a 55 Chevy with a fiberglass tilt front end that he was actually driving on the street. and we were trying, we wanted to tub it because everything was tub back then.
Yeah.
And I never built that car. I got to be about, let me think, I was 17, 18 years old, and I had decided that I liked the 55, but my taste had changed and I wanted a hot rod.
Mhm.
So I made up my mind that I wanted a 32 Ford two-door sedan, chopped. That's what I loved it. So I ended up selling that 55 to a local guy to buy the body for my 32 Ford, my two-door. And that 55 is still in Cincinnati, and I have kept track of it, but they won't sell it back to me yet. Maybe one day.
Yeah. So at this time, you got a part-time job anywhere? You working at a grocery store, junkyard? What are you doing?
Kings Island Amusement Park, I was making funnel cakes.
Sweet. That's a cool deal. The majority of people had like, oh, I worked at the grocery store. Of all the people we've interviewed, that was a big thing. And my buddies, I worked at the body shop as soon as I turned 16 and a sheep farm. I fed 350 sheep before I went to school in the morning. So
I mowed a lot of grass growing up from an early age, mowed grass, in the neighborhood and whatnot. And then, but my first real job, Joey Kerr and I went to go get jobs at Kings Island because Kings Island was a good place to work if you lived in Cincinnati. It's a huge amusement park. There's kids everywhere, so you're working around people your own age.
mm-hmm.
We went there to get a job. We wrote. Joey had a Fiero, and we took this Fiero in like 3 inches of snow and somehow made it there to get jobs. And the only jobs that were left were in the food industry. And I just looked down the list and I'm like, funnel cakes. I like funnel cakes. So we both filled out applications. Joey never showed up. He never went to work there. He wasn't going to do it. But I did work funnel cakes for one whole year there. And then what that turned into, Kings Island had, in the summertime, they were a regular amusement park. But in the winter, they had Winterfest, which was really cool. It was all Christmas stuff. And that's what I needed a job for, was the Winterfest. So I got funnel cakes there. And then what I really wanted was the next spring, I went and got a job airbrushing T-shirts at Kings Island.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, and I did that all through high school. Through high school, and then even all through into my college years. During the summer, I would airbrush T-shirts at Kings Island.
So when did you figure out that you could draw stuff as a little kid? Probably always scribbling on stuff. When did everybody?
Yeah, pretty early. Dad's a good artist. He was always a really good artist, and then my grandpa on my mom's side of the family is a phenomenal artist as well. I've got a lot of his drawings around, and like he was really good at carving, like carving wooden ducks and stuff. I've got a lot of his carvings around here. One story that I know is my kindergarten teacher. When I was in kindergarten, we had an assignment to draw something draw something we like. And I don't remember.
You weren't that kid like in Superbad movie that drew penises on everything, were you?
Well, that was later. I guess the teacher called my mom in and kind of talked to her. And I guess I had drawn a fire truck, but my fire truck had all the gauges and all the hoses and the ladder and like crazy detail on it. And the teacher knew like, this is pretty good. Like usually kids don't see all that detail. So that was kind of like and then from then on, it was just constantly drawing. Every chance I got, I drew a lot growing up. Drew hot rods, drew cars. And then that's why I did terrible at school, because I was always drawing race cars on my folders instead of studying.
See, but I had a buddy that was also a BMXer in school that he was one of them drawing on everything in school, allegedly vandalizing the bridges and all the signs in the country roads. And he runs a very, very successful 2 or 3 location tattoo shop to this day. So yes. Yeah, he turned it into his living. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Drawing that was stuff he's not supposed to.
Yep. Those were the like 3 big things in my life: was artwork, hot rods, and racing. That was what made up my entire world all through the early years. Still does.
Yeah, I said that not too long ago. My life, I'm still a 12-year-old. I live on BMX, hot rods, and boobs, and punk rock. I'm still
That's as good as it gets.
Yep, that's true. Yeah.
I did that, the S10s taught me a lot as far as the first vehicle. I had the S10 truck. Um, I remember one of the first things I did was when I got it, it had a pretty good rake to it, and I wanted to lower the back end more. So it had 3-inch blocks, and I added 2-inch blocks, so it had 5 inches of blocks in it. So I learned like how to go get long U-bolts made, stack the blocks up. I remember my dad explaining to me like, that's not really good for, he's trying to explain to me pinion angle and leaf spring slap, and I'm like, will it lower it? Yeah. Okay, I'm doing it. That's all I cared about. But those were, that was the beginning of learning that stuff and then, and from there it was, I would build an S10, get it how I wanted it. I did a paint job on that of sponge, remember the sponge paint and splatter and all that? I did all that on it. It had sponge, it had splatter, it had Flexstone sprayed all over the interior. The whole interior was just Flexstone spray paint. And then I sold it. One of the first, real quick, one of the things I did to that truck that at the time it was awesome, and it's still to think back. This would have been like early '90s. I took the Chevrolet bow tie out of the grill, and I took a hacksaw blade and I cut it out in there, and I made a piece of plexiglass and I spray painted the back of it green and glued it on there, and then mounted an 1157 bulb in there and made my bow tie light up, which sounds silly today, but back then that was like big magic.
Yeah,
I mean, I remember my high school buddies were like, "Where'd you get that?" I'm like, "I made it." But that was the learning, that was the beginning of what I do now, what we all do, building hot rods. It's just, I knew what I wanted, so I'm going to figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. Very cool.
It was cool.
You get out of high school. Are you still racing dirt cars?
Yeah. I was racing dirt modifieds, raced all through high school, and then I went to college. I went to Columbus College of Art and Design, CCAD. Got a scholarship to go there for illustration because I wanted to do what Tom Taylor and Kenny Youngblood and the boys did, concept drawings. I had made up my mind that that's what I wanted to do, was design hot rods and do concept drawings for hot rods.
For all the kids out there, yes, we have got Tom Taylor. We've interviewed him. He's been on our podcast. It was neat. And
yes,
Taylor and Youngblood, they were before this guy named Chip Foose. Now the new generation, I want to be Chip Foose, but those guys influenced Chip Foose. Yeah.
Yep. Steve Stanford. He was, those were the guys that I was looking up to. And I wanted to do what they were doing. So went to art college and then raced all through. I went to college in Columbus, Ohio, which was an hour and a half from Cincinnati. And I would drive home every weekend to race.
Still racing late
and
model?
Then a dirt modified.
Oh, dirt modified.
So like with the open front wheels.
Yeah.
And then raced it all over Southern Ohio. We ran Portsmouth, Casey, Eldora, Lawrenceburg, ran all over the place, and did good. Had a good time with that.
When we were dating, we were dirt track fans, so it wasn't even a thought because we had friends racing street stocks and stuff at Knoxville, Illinois. So every Friday night, we went to the dirt tracks no matter what. We didn't.
Yes.
Wasn't even a thought process. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. It was at that time I was full-time racing all that whole, from the time I was 15 all the way until the year 2000 when I graduated college. I was full-time racer, and what I try to explain to people is, and you guys understand this with the BMX, when you're full-time racing, there is no weddings, graduations, family reunions, none of that. There's no parties. There's no, your buddies throwing a big kegger Friday night. Let me know how it is. I'm going racing.
Yeah, the guy that manages our Napa, he's a little younger than me, and he used to race pavement cars up in Nashville. And now he's married, got like 1-year-old, 2-year-old baby, and his wife was never around him when him and his dad raced stock cars. Drove up into Nashville all the time and raced a couple other, but pavement cars. And she's like, "Do you ever think you would want to race stock cars again?" He goes, "Well, one, I'm the manager of Napa, so I don't really have time now. Yeah, I'm making more money." She goes, "You don't understand the racing life." He goes, "We would be in the garage all the time. Like the baby would have a playpen in the corner of the race shop." And she's like, "What?" And she goes, "Yeah, I don't half-ass it." He said, "If I'm going in, I'm going in deep." Yeah.
Correct. That's exactly right. And Jenny, my wife now, she understands that. We've talked about that many times because she wasn't around for when I was full-time racing either. And things will come up like a memory from back then, and I'm like, no, I didn't go to that because like Sweetheart's dance. Like, no, I didn't go to dances. I was racing.
We're eating peanut butter
and,
sandwiches over the carburetor. Yeah.
oh yeah, and like Christmas, we're back. We're spinning Daytona at the go-kart track.
Mm-hmm.
It was a full-time deal, and it was awesome. I loved it, and our whole family was into it. But it's definitely a different type of living and it's the same reason that I retired from racing to go build hot rods, and that kind of brings the story right to where we're at. So I was in college, and I knew I was going to be graduating college in the year 2000. And I was racing full time, and I knew I was going to need to be at the hot rod shows. If I was going to be designing hot rods, I was going to have to be at all these shows, and I can't do both. So the last summer we were racing, and I can remember when I was like 16, 17 years old, I remember my dad talking about racing, we'll do this until it's not fun anymore. Mm-hmm. And I remember thinking, like, what is he talking about? This is racing. It's going to be
when
fun.
Is this never going to, when is this not going to be fun? Yeah.
Yeah. So and then I remember the year was 1999. It was our last year racing. And every weekend we were on a championship year. We won the championship that year. We won like 6 features. We were flying. We didn't finish out of the top 3. I think we only finished out of the top 3 twice. Every week we were fast. But every week, Dad and I would be sitting there in the pits with the car, and we'd just be kind of nonchalantly saying, good guys, Indy's going on right now. And so-and-so and so-and-so got their roadsters done, and they're there.
Yeah.
And, just kind of like, oh, yeah, cool. But we were thinking like, damn, that's, kind of would rather be there. So the writing was on the wall. And then about August, I told my dad, I said, I think this is my last year in racing. I think I'm done. And Dad smiled and said, I've been done for 2 or 3 years. I've just been waiting on you. So he was cool. He stuck it out with me. And then he said, you need to tell the car owner right now. Because at that time, I was driving for a guy named Willis Freeman. And he said, tell Willis right now. You don't wait till the end of the year. Tell him now. So that evening, I went to Willis and told him, I said, hey, I'm graduating college. I'm going to be building hot rods and designing hot rods. And I think this is my last year. And he smiled. He knew. He's like, yeah, I kind of figured that you were about done with this. So, and he was a hot rod.
He didn't say you were about to get fired at the end of the year anyway.
Yeah. So we went out on a championship year, and then I went full into hot rodding. Just everything was hot rodding. That's when I got hooked up with Wade Hughes.
One more dirt track story. My buddy, he raced street stock, and our local, like the 3 tracks, the street stocks, they were very competitive and very quality cars, and a couple of them even got written up in the Circle Track magazines. The Martin guy, because he ran Caddy Motors. And my buddy Bill, awesome. He would finish 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and all that. He was always in the top half. He's like, I just can't beat these cheating bastards. And I go, how do you know they're cheating? He goes, because I am. He goes, they're just cheating that much better. That's a racer mentality too.
That's racer mentality. Yeah. And there's so much of that. Before we leave, there's so much of the racing mentality that made me who I am to this day. And my wife sees it. She knows it. She can tell when when I'm doing something and I'm bringing my racer mentality to it, where it's, the saying of like, we're not here to make friends. This is, I'm serious about this. It's winner take all. It's real serious. That's the racer mentality. And sometimes it's a good thing. Other times you got to dial it back a little, but it's a good thing to have in your toolbox, to have that.
But the focus compared to the BMX, there was this one of the top BMXers of all time, Greg Hill. He was very into focus and mind games compared to the other pros back then. He's racing Stu Thompson and Pete Lonkarovich, all those 80s guys. And he says, you must focus on the penny. So he would imagine that there's a penny laying in the first corner. Get to that penny first, because then you're leading at the first corner. So that focus is, everything doesn't matter. Nobody around you until you get to the penny.
Don't care about these other riders. Don't care about the lights, the yelling, that guy with the flag. None of that. The penny right there. That's good theory.
Yeah.
That's what you got to do. I walked away from full-time racing happy and had a good career at full-time racing. And then we'll get to it, but a couple years later, I got right back into vintage racing. So
Yeah, you still
that
get
was
to
a different
drive some
thing.
vintage cars. You've seen you some on Instagram taking some laps at Indy in a vintage car. And
Oh
all.
yeah, the vintage racing's awesome. It's my dad enjoys it. It's more fun because it's not as like we're not stressed out trying to shave 100,000ths of a second on the lap times, and it's just let's go out there and have fun. Let's hope the car runs good. Just go out there and get a good showing, and if everything's working good, then yeah, we're going to race hard, but it's fun racing.
Yeah,
And I
you're
do
not trying
enjoy
to make a living
racing.
at it.
Exactly. But I went full steam into the hot rodding stuff. And a real quick, good Tom Taylor story. When I was in college, one of the projects we had was write a letter to a top person in your field, introducing yourself, telling them who you are and that you want to do what they do, and show them your work and tell them that you want to do it. So naturally, I wrote a letter to Tom Taylor and sent him some of my drawing stuff. And I'll never forget it. I had no idea who Tom, I didn't know him. I just found his address in a hot rod magazine. He wrote me back. I'll give him credit for that. Wrote me back and told me that I should look into other careers because drawing hot rods pays very little. You will struggle. It does not pay good. You will not enjoy it. And by the way, buy one of my books.
Yeah,
So,
that's better than some of the, Tom. I've always been great with Tom. He's always been very cool to me. But I'm not an artist. And on the Boyd Coddington's son, Chris Coddington podcast, there's been some stories that somebody was a good artist back in that day. He would call them right up at their house and say, "Hey, you're stealing my style," and try to discourage them. But it's like,
yeah.
some of them guys like, well, I took it as a compliment that Tom Taylor was paying attention to my stuff. And now Tom won't, I tried to get him to help me on my 40 Merc project. And he goes, right now, I'm not designing any cars. I would love to work with Tom on it. I would really love to have him on, take slight old modern touch, but yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what it did for me. And if I ever get the chance to shake his hand and thank him, I will. It lit a fire in me. I took it as almost the racer mentality of, oh yeah, like it's on now. Not mean. It didn't diminish my respect and love for him and his work. I love his work. I was just like, oh, it's on. Then I can make this happen.
I had a bunch of local hot rodder guys back in the day that they're like, hot rods are cool, but it's a part-time job. You can't make a living, especially living in the Midwest. And another BMX attachment that I always looked to Rick Molinterno of Standard Bikes. He lived in Iowa, Quad Cities, close to us, and traveled the world riding for Hutch. And Haro was in the movie Rad and still builds BMX bikes around the Quad Cities. So I was like, if he can do it here, I can do hot rods here. And my dad even had trouble for quite a few years after I started doing it full time of that. Yeah, he's a hot rodder. He's still a hot rodder. But doing it for a living because he never paid anybody to do his stuff. We did everything at home. And it was just that poor farming community that people weren't doing that. Yeah, you can run a collision shop and maybe do a couple hot rods here and there. But then again, people tell you can't do it. That's my match that lights my fire.
It motivated me. It was a motivational letter. It was, And the thing is, now I'm 47 years old. I totally get what he was trying to tell me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's what I know we'll get to is that I hardly draw pictures anymore of cars. I build, I would much rather be in the shop building, fabricating, because drawing pictures of hot rods doesn't pay real well.
Yeah. So we can jump out of order. So I tried to get you, I don't know how many years ago, 5-6 years ago, maybe longer. And I think it was Detroit in the basement. And I was like, hey man, I really like you to draw a shirt for me. And you just blew me off. It's like, I only draw stuff for friends, and totally. So I was hanging out. One of the first times I really hung out with Wagner from Cornfield Customs. Huge respect for that guy. You listen to him. Yeah. He does a great podcast too. I want to get him on here. I helped him push his race car at SEMA last year. And we were hanging out during the Roadster show, doing a private tour of some guy's garage one night. And that's where I met him face to face. And he said something about, oh yeah, me and Josh did something. And I go, screw that guy. And he's like, what? I go, well, I tried to get him to draw my art and says he only does it for friends. And he just started laughing. That's Josh, he said. So yeah, he wasn't like, I'm a little bigger than him. And he was like, well, I don't want to fight. So.
No, I heard you say that on the Corey and Ashley podcast.
Yeah.
And my knee-jerk reaction right away was, there's no way I said something that mean to him. But then I started thinking to myself about being a stupid drunk back then and all my wild days. And the more I thought about it, I probably did say something that mean and that stupid, and I apologize.
Yeah, but you did kind of laugh. It wasn't like I was going to slap you.
Yeah, but and I'm sure, like in my head, I thought it was cute, but it's there's way more to it than that. But to let you know, yes, I will draw you a logo, and I'll draw you whatever you want.
We were texting about that one time, and there was a movie that said that, and this is censored. Carrie won't like what I'm going to say. It was one of those Harold and Kumar goes to White Castle or something, and his dad wanted him to be a doctor because he was smart and all this, and he goes, just because I'm hung like a moose doesn't mean I have to do porn. And well, it's like, sometimes people.
I had a conversation like that with a guy, a really, really good builder. We all know. He wanted me to do some artwork for him a couple years ago, and I didn't want to do the artwork. I'm slam busy with restoring race cars. I really didn't want to do any artwork, and he got pretty upset and aggravated that I wouldn't do drawings for him. And I tried to explain to him, you're one of the best fabricators and builders I know. So do you build mailboxes because you're such a good fabricator? You don't. Mm-hmm. You don't want to build mailboxes. You go build hot rods. Like, just because you're really, really good at something doesn't mean that you need to do that. And I know it's like a cop out, and it's not a good excuse, but it was like what you just said. Just because you're good at something, that doesn't mean that you love doing it. And part of it is burnout. I just absolutely got burnt out on doing it.
So I've seen some art in different shops. I get to tour a bunch of different shops, and Henry at Steadfast has some of your art on the walls.
Yes.
Did you have some stuff?
Alloway,
yeah. Poteet had. Did you have anything on the walls at Poteet's
I did panels. I did panels for him and shipped them to him.
Yeah. But I get it when. Yeah.
That was in like from 2000 to like 2000 to 2010. I did a lot of the artwork like that on walls and stuff, and I was doing a lot of artwork. But that's also the era that I was acting a fool and don't remember a lot of that shit. I don't. I was thinking today, 20 years ago is 2004. I don't remember 2004. I don't. I mean, I know I did some really cool stuff in 04.
Was that the year you might have got kicked out of the Street Rod Nationals?
No, that was the very first time I went.
Yeah. What year was that?
2000. The year 2000.
It rained, and you go out in the grass and start doing donuts. We didn't talk enough about your 32 Ford. Do you still have that sedan?
Oh yeah, it's torn apart at the moment, and I'm redoing like the chassis. I'm changing a bunch of stuff around on it. I'm building it the way that I wanted to build it years ago, but I'm also putting talent, like my skills that I didn't have 20 years ago. I'm putting those skills into it now. And I've also collected phenomenal speed parts for it, like, one-off Halibran wheels that I've never seen before, and just the rarest of the cool stuff that I can finally build the car with. So it's going back together with all that stuff. But yeah, when I was in college, I built that car. It was the two-door sedan. Let's talk about it.
Did it have the white, like old school flames on it at that time?
No, it was the very first time I built it, it was flat black with red steelies, because this was like 98, 99 when I built it, and that was hot then. Mm-hmm. So I got it done in 99, and then 2000, I think I took it to Columbus Good Guys in 99. I trailered it because it wasn't finished yet. You could drive it, but it wasn't street legal. There was no registration or anything to it. So I trailered it to Columbus Good Guys and just kind of idled it around, but I don't count that as like the first show. the that was in July. The August was the Street Rod Nationals, and my roommate in college, Scott Williams, who is S.A. Williams, Saw Williams on Instagram. He and I were roommates. We thrashed on that car and we drove it to Louisville. And in my mind, until you drive one to the show, that's the first show, you know. So I drove the car to Louisville. We thrashed on it all night till like 4 a.m. Got up at 6, drove it to Louisville, power parked it. Do you remember the old Louisville had the big show was out front, and then the pros pick was around back by the Cardinal Stadium.
Yep.
And you had to take golf carts around the back to get there. Well, my dad was pretty sharp. He found this spot right in the middle, halfway between, in front of like horse stable. And he's like, back your sedan in there, it'll be by itself, and all the pro builders and all the magazine people will have to ride their golf carts by here. So you know they're going to see it. So I did. Well, then about 2 p.m, Scott and I, we had run out of steam. We climbed in a car and passed out. We took naps. We were so tired. We hadn't slept in like 2 days. I was asleep in the car, and Brian Brennan went by on his golf cart and stopped and snuck up and took a picture of me and Scott sleeping in the car. And Dad was standing there, and Dad had enough sense to grab Brian and said, hey, just to let you know, those boys, they weren't out partying last night. They thrashed on that car all week to get it here. And Brian, being Brian, liked that and was like, well, tell me about the car. So Dad told him about the car. And then when I woke up, Dad's like, you need to go talk to this guy. And went and talked to him and got a magazine shoot for American Rodder that week, that right then and there.
Very cool.
So that was Friday. Friday night, went and did a magazine shoot there locally. I was on cloud nine because, as you know from our era, getting in a magazine was everything.
Yeah.
Like there was no internet, there was no ham. Getting a magazine was everything. So they did a magazine shoot. I was on cloud nine. Saturday it rains, and we're standing around, and everyone cleared out of the grass, and that wet grass was out there, and I'm a dirt driver. And my roommate in college, Scott's like, hey, I got my camera with me. And we had already went and found like a back gravel driveway way off the fairgrounds, and went and ripped some donuts and got some really cool pictures of my sedan sliding sideways and stuff. But that wasn't enough for us. So he said, go out there in that grass and rip some donuts and I'll take pictures. So now the funny thing was I had slicks on. I had pie crust slicks. So it wasn't like destroying the grass, but it also wasn't good. So we went out and I ripped about 6 or 7 donuts, and I still have those pictures. They're awesome pictures. But I ripped 6 or 7 donuts. We got some pictures, and it wasn't like I'll brag a little bit. They weren't quick donuts. I was like drifting in like 100-foot circles around like a big ring. So, big long slides. Came back up to the pavement, got out, cars got mud all over it. We're kind of all laughing and like, oh, that was cool. And here come the Kentucky State Police and NSRA golf carts and everyone. They were not happy. And the fact that we wouldn't stop smiling, I think made it worse.
Yeah, right.
We're 20, 21 years old. We all think it was the coolest thing ever. I remember the Kentucky State Patrol that escorted me out. He was actually the only guy that was like smiling and thought it was cool too. He's like, so what happened now? And like the NSRA guys are huffing and puffing. And they're like, he was out there and he's ripping donuts. And they're like, and the cop was like, well, did he hit something? They're like, no, he's just, throwing mud. And the cop's like, well, if he didn't, there was no accident. You could tell the cop was kind of like, what's the big deal here? But they did escort me out, took my credentials, and I got a police escort out of the NSRA Nationals my very first time there. Right after my magazine shoot, from like hero to zero in one day. But that story,
all of us
stuck.
other people that didn't see it, we didn't hear about the magazine shoot. We heard about the donuts. So and all
that
of
story stuck.
Yeah, so you might have been a little hero to a lot of us there too, that you're out there just having fun.
And that side, the way that story grew legs, and like how much guys enjoyed it and thought it was cool, fed fed more of that. That's another thing kind of we should talk about is the hot rodding scene at that time. The traditional hot rods were just coming on. Like the rat rods had appeared. Rat rods were getting huge, and even my car.
The Easter egg era was still kind of
exactly the billet.
I still like the Easter egg era and all the billet Little John stuff, but
yeah, we grew up
kind of getting tired of that at that time, and
we grew up with it. And you know, my
Calvin and pushing them off and all that was big then.
And that was it. Like the whole scene was trailer queens and Easter eggs and billet and perfectness and power windows and power doors and power
drink
antennas
holders
and all that stuff. And I remember my Calvin and my sedan, when you opened my Calvin, it had lettered in there, billet this, because we just were so like anti-billet and anti-establishment, and we were going to be the outlaw kids. And what I kept going back to was the history magazines we all grew up reading and looking at was the history of hot rodding. When you looked at the early years of hot rodding, the hot rodders were rebels. They were bad guys. They were like looked down upon. The police hated them. The public hated them. They were a nuisance with these loud cars. And I like that. That's what I wanted to be. And I know the whole history of hot rodding was this romantic, awesome story of how it went from these hoodlums with these loud cars to winning over the public and winning over the police, and then becoming public servants and turning this nasty hot rodding into like this polished, cool thing in the 70s. It started to have, get huge, and a whole industry grew up. And then in the 80s, money came in and some really big builds came in. And then the 90s, it was on a top level. It had went on this big hill up, and then here I came and I wanted to just drop it right back down to the beginning. And it was just a mindset of let's be loud, let's be disruptive, let's be those annoying kids.
That's kind of about the time that the shifters started in Southern California building their stuff like that too.
Exactly. We were seeing the shifters, and the Car Culture Deluxe magazine came out, and we were seeing like the little pictures of the shifters and Jimmy Shine's truck. He had built his truck, and we were all geeking over it. And that whole undercurrent came about, and it was kind of an outlaw undercurrent. It was like a punk rock thing coming into this shiny billet hot roddy world. This punk rock thing came in, and I'm glad, I'm honored to be a part of it, and look back of, we were there and we did that, and we have the scars and the broken bones and the burn up clothes to prove it. But it was a lot of dumb things we did, but also it's just like the story of the donuts. It was a dumb thing, but everyone smiles and winks like, that was kind of cool.
So this is kind of getting out of I don't know what year it was, but Bowling Green was just filled full of people. Carrie works for the company that runs Hot Rod Power Tours. So you haven't been there after the first year. You've been there 10 years helping at that company. So 8 years ago or whatever, Power Tour ended in Bowling Green the same weekend as the Hot Rod Reunion was going on. So, all the hotels were just slammed. So I don't know who owned the car, but you guys were involved. Your Black Shirt Mafia guys, right?
Yep. The BSM.
Yeah. And you took whoever's nitro car and did a cackle in the parking lot for the parking lot party at the Holiday Inn. That wasn't the problem. Well, we were there. We got hungry. We walked down to the Double Dogs and eat. So we missed seeing it on 1-to-1, but we heard it, that somehow somebody dared somebody, I triple double dog dare you, and you guys pulled that on the road in Bowling Green and lit it, did a burnout.
That was Mr. Mike Whitney. But that was I was there.
Who's Mike Whitney? Is that the guy with the black 32 one hot rod of the year a couple years ago?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
That one. That was him. Yep. That one hot rod of the year 2 years ago. That was him.
Awesome.
Awesome. Yeah, I was there.
Shame on him.
Yeah, that's right. All the BSM guys were there. I was there. That was by then. Mike Whitney had started restoring. I was restoring sprint cars and Indy cars, and Mike Whitney had started restoring dragsters and front engine, like fuel altereds and dragsters. And he had just finished that restoration for a guy named Mark Bowles in Cincinnati. Mark's got a phenomenal collection of fuel autos and dragsters still to this day. And it was cool because like Mike had the dragster restoration side of it wrapped up, and I was doing the IndyCar stuff. And then we both would bring these phenomenal cars to the shows. And we were at Bowling Green, and Whitney is and was just as ruthless and crazy as the rest of us. And one thing led to another, and then Whitney said, "I want to clear away because we're going to fire this thing off, and I'm making a pass." And I mean, what's funny is there was no, let's think about this. Should you really do it? It was like, oh yeah, that's got to happen. Clear the path. And so it did happen. I can't really take full credit for it. I can't take full credit for it. That was Mr. Whitney and the boys.
And we walked back, and there was cops everywhere. And from that night, the Bowling Green for every big car show, the LS Fest or whatever, is totally changed. Even the Tri-5, the older guys, they block concrete blocks, so you can't cruise both ways on that road, all because of that night. But yeah, it was pretty.
If I had a dime for the "we ruined it for everyone" scenario, I think I'd be doing it pretty good. You know, I'll tell you a quick story of how what fueled that more than anything. Our dad, you might remember this, but my dad, Whitney's dad, was a drag racer and a hot rodder back in the day. There's a story from the Pigeon Forge Nationals. When the Street Rod Nationals was big down in Pigeon Forge, they had a rod run down there. We all heard several stories of one year down there, would have been around like 78, 79, that a guy unloaded a front engine dragster and took it right down through Gatlinburg, through the center of Gatlinburg, and did a burnout, and they arrested him, and he went to jail and everything. We all thought that was the coolest story we'd ever heard. So that really fueled that deal. That night of Whitney was like, I want to enact that. We got to do it. And yeah, and we knew it would ruin it for everyone, but it did it. And you know, I've asked old timers about that Gatlinburg deal, and I've talked to many old guys who are like, oh yeah, I remember that happening, but nobody really knows who it was, what car it was. I've talked to guys that were there and they said, oh yeah, we were there and we saw it, but they don't know who he was or what the car was. But I
just remember it was the BSM crew. That's what I remembered.
That was that we're back to, I don't remember 2004, the BSM guys. That's the black shirt BSM, black shirt mafia guys. Yeah. Just a crew of us that were all hot rodders, hell raisers, bar fighters, drinkers, just troublesome kids. Most of us grew out of it.
So let's go back. You getting into the hot rod world, and so what did you start working on right from the start?
I had a cool start in hot rodding. I went to work for Wade Hughes. He was in Cincinnati. I went and saw, my dad was like, you know, if you want to work in hot rods, go see Wade, what he tells you. So I went and saw Wade, and Wade said, yeah, you know, I'll hire you and you can just start sweeping the floors and sanding Bondo and doing work, and whatever happens. So I did. I was, you know, sanding Bondo there, spraying primer, learning all I could from Wade. This was 2000, 99, 2000, 98, 99, 2000, right in there. And remember Street Rodder Road Tour and Jerry Dixie. So in 99, I think, Wade Hughes got tapped to build the Street Rodder Road Tour car, which was a 36 Chev two-door sedan. Mm-hmm. And Wade built it, and that's when I first got a up-close, eye-opening experience of what is involved with a magazine build, an industry build, the ups, the downs, all the politics, the craziness. You know, everyone's sending us these parts. We're building it. I built the like chrome Nerf bars for the car. If you look at that car, it's got chrome Nerf bars and bumpers like an Indy car. But Wade, being Wade, called Jerry Dixie. I had never met any of these people when I was 21. Called Jerry Dixie and told Jerry, hey, I got a kid working at the shop. He can fix anything on the car. He helped with the car. you should take him with you on the first leg of the road tour. And the road tour was Jerry Dixie was flying from his home in Youngstown, Ohio to Cincinnati. He was going to fly in, show up at Wade Hughes's, get in the car, and drive it to Bakersfield, California.
Has
First shot.
Jerry Dixie ever not had a mullet?
No, always.
See, I used to think it was funny.
He made his
now I'm jealous that he still has great hair compared to what I can grow now. So
he made his money in the van craze back in the 70s. So you know that he had it back in the day. Yeah. He came in and his job was to drive the car from Cincinnati to Bakersfield, California to go to the NSRA West Nationals, and then drive the car back from Bakersfield to Knoxville to the Spring Knoxville Nationals we all would go to. And Wade talked him into sending me as a riding mechanic.
Yeah, Jerry Dixie's the original and still current road dog champion in my mind.
Oh, my
miles he put in hot rods, man.
Yeah, that dude, yes. I mean, all the way. He doesn't get the credit he deserves, and that dude, we talk about iron ass and like a driving guy. That guy's driven hot rods from the end of the country and back like several times a month. You know, he's done.
I'd like to he'd be a good interview on here. He'd be a great interview.
He'd be an awesome interview if you could get him to tell the stories. Like he's one of them guys that has stories that can't be told publicly. One of those.
Same thing with Wings Callahan. Yeah, he couldn't tell me stories that he's told me in parking lots. Yeah,
Wings and Jerry and them guys, they know where like the bodies are buried.
Allegedly, you have to say allegedly.
Yeah.
So,
but
you went on that first road trip with him.
I got to go, and Jerry. I found out after the fact that Jerry wasn't too happy about this. Like he didn't want some 20-year-old kid riding with him to California. Like, you know, and thinking back on it, I don't blame him. Like he didn't know me. Yeah. That could be a terrible scenario. So I jumped in the car with him. We hauled butt down, and we went right south down by Memphis. And you'll appreciate this. We got right down by Memphis, and we were going around an exit ramp, and I heard a knocking and knew the rear axle bearing was going in the car. And I'm like, we got issues. You hear that? He's like, yeah, I hear it and I feel it. I said, I think we got an axle bearing going out. It had a junkyard 8-inch in it. And I said, if you can, and Jerry's like, Jerry is not a mechanic. He does not work on the cars. He doesn't do any of that. He said, can you fix it? I said, yeah, if you can find an AutoZone and we can get the parts, I can fix this thing. You know, I brought tools with me because I was the ride-along mechanic. So, and I'm thinking like, I hope I can fix this thing. You know, this is like put up or shut up time right now. So Jerry says, well, let me make a phone call. I've got a buddy here close that might have a shop we can do the work in. And I'm like, okay.
Which he
calls Vernon Walker.
NSRAs, yeah, Vernon Walker.
He calls Vernon Walker, and I don't know this at the time. He's like, we're going to my buddy Vernon's house to work on it. And I'm like, okay. You know, we pull in, and Vernon has a 1955 Texaco gas station restored in his yard, complete with like inventory on the shelves and a lift, the way it was in the 1950s. I'm blown away. I'm freaking out, trying to act cool. But we rolled in. We were able to get the axle bearing at an AutoZone. Rolled in there. Vernon Walker got right in there with me, and I had never met him, and I remember we had to unhook the fuel line for some reason.
So obviously Vernon was not the one that kicked you out of the Street Rod Nationals.
No, I'm trying to think. No, I don't think that ever came up, obviously. But yeah, he didn't put two and two together. But I just remember we unhooked the gas line and like gasoline's running down both of our shirts and everything, and just he was right in there with us. He liked the fact that, you know, we were broke down coming through and we were able to fix it. So I was able to fix it, got us back on the road, and immediately I was like cool with Jerry. Jerry's like, okay, this kid's, you know, he can handle it. We hauled ass to Bakersfield, California. We went straight to Street Rod Nationals headquarters. And now, mind you, I'm trying to like bless you.
Thank you.
I'm trying to become a designer, hot rod designer, but I don't know any of the builders. And we went straight to Street Rodders headquarters. Then we went to a lunch. Jerry said, hey, we got to go to lunch. We walked into a lunch at a restaurant, and sitting at the table is Boyd Coddington, Brizio, Brennan, like every big builder that I'd ever read about was at this lunch. And I'm just like, holy crap. Like, I wasn't saying anything, but I don't even remember how I think it was just because at the time I was always doodling. If I was bored, I would doodle on napkins. And that entire lunch, we sat there and Brennan and Dixie were quizzing Brizio and Boyd and all those guys. What are you guys working on? What are you building for a Riddler car? What are you building for the Nationals? What are you bringing to good guys? And they were telling about the cars. And the whole time they were telling, I was sketching them out on a napkins at the placemats. And when the lunch was done, I handed all those guys drawings of the cars they were talking about.
Very
and it was
cool.
just like quick sketches. And immediately they were just like, who? And I'm like, well, I'm the kid from Ohio. And from that, immediately that day on, I had work design hot rods. It was that one lunch, that one move started it all.
Yeah.
So like, if there's any advice in this, it's, don't be afraid to jump in there and pull a move like that.
I actually posted on a comment on one of the aftermarket pages on SEMA today about the SEMA show, and people were saying this and that. And I was like, you just have to be there, show up. I mean, not the SEMA show, any event that you go to. You could have said, no, I don't want to drive across country. And if you didn't do that, I mean, look at the people you would not have met. I met somebody in the hallway after hours when she wanted to go find tacos, standing by a car that I built at SEMA. It totally changed our life. Got me to volunteer on a TV show, got us to move to Tennessee, which we love. I'm more excited about that. Did TV for a couple years, opened a lot of doors. I do race announcing now, all because of meeting Kevin Tates in the hallway at the SEMA show. You just never know same thing at the hot rod shows. You meet more people and connections in the parking lot than you probably do during the day.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
I give a speech to vocational kids every year at the indoor show, and I have 10 things I tell them, like tips to how to make it in the hot rodding world. And one of the most important things I tell them is go talk to guys. Mm-hmm. If you see a guy that has a car you like, go talk to him, say hi. I know it's hard for kids to say hi. I was that kid. When you're a kid, you're embarrassed. You're scared you're going to get yelled at, and you might get yelled at because a lot of these guys are grumpy.
I was the shyest, whitest little kid till BMX brought me out of my shell, and I'm still that way. She goes, leave that guy alone. I was like, okay, this is bitching. I want to go up and talk to this guy or somebody that I know but never met, and I'll talk to anybody about cars.
And 99% of the time, it's a guy like you or I, where if a kid comes up to me today and wants to talk about something I built, I'm more than happy to talk to him because in my head, I'm like, oh, wow, a young kid that's interested. I need to talk to this kid.
Yeah.
And that's what happened to me was I met those old guys that they liked, the talking to the young guys. They loved it.
Tim likes to overshare.
He says I have verbal diarrhea.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, but just meeting those connections, that's it. That's important. Yeah. That is important.
But there's a line. There's like yesterday, we had people delivering firewood, and Tim's telling them his whole life story.
No, I told him about a crazy dream I had about the landfill.
Exactly. You're telling
I'm just making conversation. Yeah. I didn't tell him when we were going to be gone. I just told him that I had a dream that the landfill build a road by our property.
Well, story time. It was story time.
Yeah.
that one lunch though. That one lunch set me up.
Carrie's just unloading the wood with resting bitch face. I'm trying to be friendly to the people. So yeah. Yeah. So you met all those people. Did you ever do design work for any Boyd and all them stuff, guys?
Oh yeah. All those guys that remember Lombardo? I think it was
Chuck Lombardo. I was on the advisory board with him.
I did
at Wild Tech for about 4 years.
I did drawings for him. Boyd kind of had his own drawings going with Foose, but Brizio still knows me to this day because of that lunch. When he sees me, he'll say hi. It worked out good. And then, it got me in the door with those guys, but also Street Rodder. Like I started doing concept drawings and artwork for Street Rodder magazine. Mm-hmm. Brian Brennan's such a cool guy. He helped me out so much over the years, not only with giving me designs, but good advice, good life advice. That dude's sharp and just a neat guy.
He's our longest interview now. His sound quit a little over 2 hours. So we tried to do a double up and re-record 20 minutes and ended up being another hour. So we have over 3 hours worth of 2 parts with Brennan. So
yeah. I mean, one of the easiest things I can remember him teaching me was I had done some work with Street Rodder, and I was set up to do a show with them, a design with them, and I got an offer from another magazine to do some work. And I wanted to do the other magazine, but I didn't want to offend Brian. So I called Brian. I said, "Hey, here's the situation. I know I've got to do all this work with you guys, and I want to do it, but I have this other opportunity to do that." And Brian was super cool about it. He said, "You do whatever you want, but remember the old saying of dance with the person that brought you to the dance."
Out,
And I
Bobby
started
Alloway
thinking
says
about
that
it.
too.
And I started thinking about it. I'm like, man, and I started remembering all the stuff that Street Rodder magazine had done for me and Brian had done for me. And like the whole reason this other company wanted me to do work was because all this stuff that I'd done with Street Rodder. And I'm like, yeah, that's good theory. Like Brian didn't care what I did. He just wanted to point it out. Like, we've done a lot for you, but make up your own mind. And those kind of lessons work, man. That's good stuff.
Yep. So you're
He's
doing
a
that.
good
You get back from that trip. When did you start doing? When was the first time you went to Alloway's to lay out flames?
Oh 03, 02, I think 02. I was working at Wade Hughes' shop, and I'll take this time right away. The Ohio Heat look and the Ohio Flame. I get a lot of credit for doing those flames because I've done a lot of them. But the originators was Bill Rell, a guy named Bill Rell, whose nickname was Short Round, and Jim Farr, whose nickname was Dauber. Those are two Cincinnati guys. They're both pinstripers, custom painters, and they are legendary. We just lost Rell last year. Just such a phenomenal, legendary pinstriper. And then Jim Farr still doing work.
See, my paint legend, which I'm lucky to still be friends with this day, is Danny Taylor out of Louisville.
Yeah.
Him and his dad did Taylor's House of Color, then they split up. But Danny supposedly is going to come to Tennessee this winter and help me put some stupid graphics on my OBS truck.
That's awesome. The way it was going was the very first Alloway made the Flames famous overnight with the Fraternal Twins, the Fire Eternal Twins cars, which was a 33 Roadster and a 33 Coupe, and they were both flamed. And Bill Rell, Jim Farr, and Wade Hughes did those two cars, and they were on the cover of Street Rodder magazine coming down the highway. And the big deal about that was, and this comes from Alloway and Brennan and all of them, at that time, every car on the cover of the magazine had to be hot pink, teal, bright yellow, bright cars. And the word was out that if you had a black car, you would not get a cover of a magazine because black cars didn't show up good on magazine covers and they wouldn't sell. And out of nowhere, Alloway came out with these two flame cars and no one had done a flamed hot rod in like 2 decades. It just was dead. And he brought these two cars out and it just revived the whole flame industry. Wade did the spraying. He sprayed the candies, and he's still to this day a master at that. His candies that you see on those flames, people ask me all the time, like, what's the big deal about those flames? If you see them in person in the sun, you'll get it. He gets colors that are just amazing. I was working at Wade Hughes's, and they were flaming through like 3 to 5 cars a week. Just one after another. And there was 3 cars in enclosed trailers out in the parking lot that were waiting to be flamed. And Wade needed to flame them. And Dauber was nowhere to be found. He wasn't, he's one of the artist type guys. And he was in one of his moods and he wasn't coming. And he was going to get there when he got there. And Wade knew that I could draw flames and that I had already drawn flames and laid flames out on stuff around the shop. So Wade knew I could do it. And Wade got pissed off enough one day and said, bring that red Roadster in here. Josh, you're laying it out. So I laid it out and I made it look like, like the Ohio Heat. My flames were a little bigger, a little wider, a little bigger, but I made them look like Rells and Daubers and laid it out, and Wade sprayed it, and I pinstriped around it, and Wade took one look and said, "You're doing the rest of them." And from that day on, it was just Wade and I doing them. And there were some hard feelings there that I regret because I got so much respect for Dauber and Rel. I was able to mend my relationship with those guys because I showed them so much respect. But for many, many years, the relationship between Wade and Dauber and Rel never did recover, which sucks. It sucks because it's, those were old timers that were top of their game. And I didn't want to be the one that did that. But Wade, I'm working for Wade, and Wade's saying, lay the flames out and stripe them. I did that, and then I did 4 or 5 of them right there for Wade, and then Wade had to go to Alloway's to flame a car, and Wade told Alloway, I got a new guy that does the layout and pinstriping. You'll love him. He's coming with me, and we're coming. And that was 02, 03. I think I'm sure it was a Speed Star, but I'm not sure which one it was. One of the very first ones.
Bobby's always been kind of one of my guys in the industry. Has always been super cool. You call him with business questions. Even as a younger guy, he was always very supportive. But how was it knowing, you obviously knew who Bobby Alloway was, going into his shop the first time? It's different. Still, I go to other buddies' shops now, and it's different when you go to somebody else's shop, the vibe, where the tools are, than it is, I know where everything is in my shop. I can, close my eyes and walk over to the toolbox. But walking in to Bobby Alloway, how did that work the first time?
I was nervous, as I should be. It helped that I was going with Wade. Wade had done it so many times. He was just like, yeah, we go in here, we do this, and we do that. We showed up. I was nervous about going to do work at Bobby's shop, and I was nervous to meet Bobby. Then I met Bobby, and within 5 minutes, you're like, this is the coolest guy I've ever met. He's awesome. His dogs are awesome. He's awesome. He's talking to me like a normal guy, just a great guy. But one of the things that really helped relax me in an odd way was I walked in and I looked around the shop, and the guys working the shop were like me. They were my age. Mike Barillero was in there building, working on stuff. Josh Bailey. All these guys that were his employees were my age. And I was just kind of like, this place, it just dawned on me, these cars are being built by guys like me. Alloway is up on this pedestal because he's the king and he's owns the shop and it's his ideas. But it dawned on me this hollowed work that I'm looking at is done by normal guys. And that really helped me to realize man, I could do this. So we went in there, and when we would flame at Alloway's, we would work all night. I'd go in, we'd show up at we'd drive down in the morning, we'd show up at about noon, drive 5 hours, show up at noon. I'd lay the car out by 3 o'clock, and then we'd start masking it. And then Wade would spray candies till 3 in the morning. And then,
and if nobody's ever been to the Alloway shop back then, I'm sure, because I've been there recently, there's no $100,000 paint booth at Alloway shop.
No. It's like a phone booth. Yeah.
The 2-stall garage.
It's built for a hot rod. That's it. You're not pulling a big Ford truck in there or anything to paint. Yeah. So we would paint all night, and that's how the paintings on the walls started. Is Wade's in there spraying till 2, 3 in the morning. I'm standing there bored. Everyone left, and Wade's character of his own. Wade comes out and he's like, "Hey, see that wall? Paint a picture of a hot rod on that wall." I'm like, "For real?" Yeah. Bobby will love it. So Wade talks me into building or painting this cartoon. If you go there, it's the truck that says Alloway Hot Rod Shop on the door, and it's a cartoon hot rod.
So you're saying the very first time you were at Alloway's and left in there all night, you vandalized his shop.
Yep. And Bobby didn't know it. He came out the next day and saw it, and Wade thought it was funny. I was a little nervous. Bobby took one look, kind of studied it, and was like, "Come with me." So we walked in the other room, and he goes, "See these walls? I want hot rods on all those walls." So then every time I was there, when Wade was spraying, I would be painting on the walls at Alloway's. That's all that stuff that was painted there was just during downtime while Wade was flaming.
Was this before or after his fire?
After.
Okay.
After. I didn't know. Yeah, this was after.
Okay.
When we got there, the very first time I went, it was only maybe 6 to 8 months after. Well, I don't know how long after the fire it was because they had rebuilt the buildings,
Mm-hmm.
but there were still burnt carcasses of cars in a pile behind the shop.
And melted
And there
engine
was
blocks.
oh yeah, and of
Yeah.
course me being a rat rod type kid, I'm back there digging parts out. I dug out half of an ET3 wheel, magnesium wheel that was melted,
Oh
and I
wow.
took it up there and I'm like, "What are you gonna do with this?" And Bobby's like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, "This is cool." And Bobby being Bobby, he got it. He's like, "If you want stuff out of that burn pile, you can take it under one condition. I better never see any of it on any of those builds, those rat rods you and your buddies are building." And I was like, okay, that's fine. So one of my prized possessions, the fraternal twins we talked about,
Mm-hmm.
the 33 Roadster had a Duval windshield on it.
Mm-hmm.
I have the Duval windshield off that car that is melted. When that car burnt, the windshield dropped down and it melted itself around the steering column. So like the steering column bulge is still in it. I've got that windshield frame hanging in my garage to this day.
Oh wow.
And like I promised him, I'll never use it on a car. But but it was right after the fire, and I remember at that time the fire was kind of a sore subject, like it should be. Like he wasn't talking a lot about it. And years after that, he just laughs about it and will tell you all about it. But when we first went, he wasn't too talkative about it.
Yeah.
It was kind of like hushed tones, like, "Oh yeah, that was. Let's not talk about that."
Yeah.
And as
so.
people that don't know, his shop got hit with lightning and burnt the whole shop down. It knocked a propane line, knocked the heater loose, broke a propane line open, set the shop on fire, and he had a massive collection of magnesium wheels and parts, like I do, and it went up and burnt bad, and burned his whole shop down, and just a terrible deal. But he recovered.
Yeah. Yeah. So when did you build the Dynaliner for Scott? Dynaliner for Scott.
Dynaliner was in '06, so from '02 to '06, those were the party years. Me just wild and partying and driving my sedan everywhere, doing a lot of flame work. And then my roommate from college, Scott, he got a job at Dynamat as their ad design. Remember the big poster of the Dynamat coupe with the real cool? My roommate Scott did that. He was an artist too.
Cool.
So he was their ad design guy, and I was building hot rods out of my own garage in Hamilton, Ohio, and Scott called me and said, "Hey, Dynamat builds half cars. You know the half cars. They take the SEMA, they would take a car and they'd cut it in half right down the center. Like it could be a Ford Eclipse, it could be a 55 Chevy, whatever. They'd cut it down the center and then they'd put it at SEMA on a stand and you could see inside the car where all the Dynamat goes." So at that time, Brookville was making the very first 32 3-window coupes. And if you remember correctly, Brookville had that 32 3-window door. They just had a door they were torn around. And I got a call that they were going to build a half car of a 32 Ford 300 coupe. So we built the .5 car, and a lot of people don't know that car exists. It was in Rodder's journal, and it's half of a 32 Ford 3-window coupe. And the funny story about that is Scott Whitaker, and I'll call him Whitaker because the Scots get confusing. Whitaker, the owner of Dynamat, he wanted us to build a half of a 32 3-window coupe. He said, "I want it to be a Bonneville car. Don't chop it, and I want it painted blue." And we chopped it 10 inches and painted it copper and ivory. So, like, totally went the exact opposite. But he saw it, he saw it and was like, kind of dug it. But then the public saw that half car at SEMA and just, it was a big hit. And then right away, that was in 05. Right away, Whitaker said, "I want the first 32 3-window coupe from Brookville, and I want you to build me." He said, "I want you to build the real car. That half car, make it a real car." Brookville said no to the first one. They kept the first one, and I was thinking we'd get number 2, but an interesting fact about the Dynaliner Coupe is that it's not a numbered Brookville car. I had to build it from raw stampings. They weren't done making the 3-window coupe, so we got a door, we got a cowl, we got a quarter, but the roof and like the back window was just the raw first stamp where it forms the metal, but the window's not cut out and all the flash around it was still on it. That's all I got, and I had to build the body from scratch. B pillars, A pillars, wood. I had to build the whole thing from scratch. So I assembled that car from nothing. Scott Williams, my roommate, and I, we built that whole car in bare metal, unchopped, and we did a photo shoot of that car in bare metal, unchopped. We called it a Riders Journal photo shoot because Riders Journal always did the bare metal shoots. We did a photo shoot of that car in bare metal, unchopped, and those photos never were published, but they do exist. And then we chopped the heck out of it. Built it in 06. Dennis Lewis in Latitz, Pennsylvania built the flathead for it. People that know me know I am not a flathead fan. I don't like flatheads.
I like flatheads as long as they're somebody else's. I don't like to put them in cars. Yeah, I'll take a small block Chevy over a flathead any day.
Yeah, so I was against the flathead thing from the beginning. I'm like, why are we putting a tractor engine in this car? This is a badass hot rod, and I complained about it until we got the car done and drove it. And to this day, that's one of the best running, feeling flatheads I ever drove. It ran good. We built that car in maybe 4 months. It was like a thrash. Built it very quickly, got it done. Put one weekend, I had Whitaker put 27 miles on it, just driving it around. And we left the very first drive on that car as he drove it from Cincinnati all the way to SEMA on the Posies tour.
Yep.
And it made it no problem, made it all the way. I went along as a ride-along mechanic on that, and I ended up working on all the other cars on the tour. And not the coupe. So that car, really, it was a good piece for my resume because since my sedan, that was one of the first cars that I had totally built from scratch and got to do everything I wanted to do. Like open checkbook, build the baddest hot rod you can think of. And that's what we built.
And you made
it was cool.
And people thought it was an old race car. Because it wasn't
the patina
shiny and rubbed. It was chipped and patinaed, and people thought it was a legit old race car that you guys found.
We had a lot of people that swore up and down they knew the car. They had saw the car race at Bonneville. That was common. People like, oh, I remember this car. Yeah, this car. I got a magazine at home's got this car in it. Because my roommate Scott Williams, he gets a lot of credit for that. He was one of the ones that was experimenting with muriatic acid and any chemical we could find, just seeing what it would do to the aluminum, the magnesium, and aging it. And then when you see that car in person, you get it. It looks legit. It looks old.
Yeah.
Everything on that car is brand new, and it looked old. it looked awesome. And as far as I know, it's still like the only car in his collection that like runs and drives perfect every day. He drives. Whitaker drives that car a bunch. It's cool to see it like at Bowling Green and stuff. It's cool to still see that car out.
Whitaker's a cool dude. Very cool dude.
Yeah, he's wild. He's a wild dude. He was fun to like give projects to. Like you didn't want him in the shop every day, so we would be like, hey, we need gauges for this car. And he would take off and go to his office at Dynamat, and he would just like search the internet and come up with some crazy rare bomber gauge from a World War II bomber that was, price on an object, and he would bring these things to us, and we're like, yes, that's going in the car. So that was cool to have a guy like that with the resources that could get the rarest, coolest stuff.
As they say, either Fast and Furious or Gone in 60 Seconds, somebody's got to order the pizza.
Yeah, exactly. You're exactly right. That was really the last hot rod I built. After that car, I went to the sprint car stuff. It all went open wheel after that.
So you went, where did you go then? Were you doing stuff on your side? I know you've worked for a couple shops. in between
Yeah,
then and
when I
now.
built the Dynamac Coupe, I was working for Scott Whitaker at Speed Kings, and then we built the coupe and we built a roadster that I built about half of a roadster, and then I went back on my own. There was a shop there.
Was that the black and green one?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. That car is a long story. That car was supposed to be a drift car for
Oh.
SEMA. Like that car was. I designed that car to be a competition drift car for SEMA for the next year. And that's why, if you look at that car, it's got a Roush Yates injected, dry sumped race engine in it, Mosier race axles, Tremec 6-speed. I mean, it's like I said, it's dry sumped. It's got KSE sprint car steering box in it. And one thing, if you notice, next time you see that car, the wishbones, the front wishbones curve in. That's for front wheel clearance for drifting side to side.
Okay, yeah.
That whole car was built to be a drift car, and halfway through the builds, Whitaker changed his mind and didn't want to drift it. And we butted heads on that. Like, I'm like, well, then why are we building it with all this race car stuff? And he's like, well, I want a cruiser, a country cruiser. And we butted heads, and that was it. The car went to the country cruiser side, and unfortunately, the car never got to like perform its full potential. Like it was built to beat on. That car was built to beat on. That same time there in Cincinnati, there was a shop called Zakira's Garage, and Zakira's was ground zero for Miller race cars. And that was right there in Cincinnati. It was owned by a guy named Dean Butler, and Dean's claim to fame is he invented and started lens crafters.
Oh,
So,
wow.
I mean, this dude's awesome. Neat guy. I've gotten to be really good friends with him. Just a fascinating guy. He lives in England now, but he started Zakira's, and he was a Miller guy, and he's the guy that found and bought the entire collection of Miller patterns and drawings and got them to Cincinnati and got them in one place and started casting Miller parts. And then about that time,
For people
06,
that don't
07,
know, I don't know exactly the years. What were the years that they did Miller cars?
Miller was big from his first engine he ever built was 1917,
Oh, okay.
but he didn't get big at Indy till 21, 22. And his engines in 21 and 22, his engines were put in other race cars. There were Duesenberg race cars that had Miller engines in them in 21 and 22. And then in 1923, Tommy Milton showed up with a Miller built car and a Miller engine and put it on the pole and won the race. And from 23 all the way till 1932, 23 to 32, that 10 years, Miller dominated. He was the Roger Penske of India that era. It was either Miller or Duesenberg, those two. They were the ones. And it's hard to understand how big and how important Miller was at Indy in those years.
And if you never know a Miller, please Google Miller race cars to see how beautiful the grills and the shape and the design. Those cars were just, every time I go to the museum in Indy, it's just, I take a bunch of, it's just, they're incredible.
So much of what we know and what we do in hot rodding and automotive performance, from the look and the performance side and the technology side, all traces back to Harry Miller. I tell people all the time, I said, go online, search Harry Miller, go down that rabbit hole, and I apologize to you right now for all the time and work you're going to lose. Because if you get hooked, you're going to spend days down the rabbit hole of Harry Miller and the stuff. From front wheel drive to superchargers to intercoolers to disc brakes to monocoque race cars. Anything you can think of, it all started with Harry Miller. He is the great grandfather of American motorsports. It all starts with him. And he was a genius. Crazy man. He was nuts. When you get down the rabbit hole, you'll find out, like most geniuses, he had a pet monkey that he would turn loose in the drawing room and they didn't like it.
She always wanted a pet monkey. I painted a car for a guy back in the Illinois days. He had a pet monkey, as we get sidetracked. And the monkey would masturbate and look you in the eye. But he would do that when the women of the house was that time of the month. So when his daughter became a teenager and all of her girlfriends, so somebody was always there of all the people. So that monkey would just stand at the kitchen table and look at him in the eye and masturbate until he passed out. So they gave him to a zoo. They had to get rid of the pet monkey, the pet masturbation.
Yeah, he had to go.
Yeah.
He had to go. I agree. Yeah. But Miller was just a genius. When you go down the rabbit hole, you'll learn that there was three guys. Harry Miller was the genius that thought it up. Leo Guzin was a draftsman that could draw anything. He had the unbelievable gift of taking Harry's crazy idea and could draw it so that it could be built and machined. And then Fred Offenhauser was the head machinist. And Fred was a master machinist that could machine and make anything. And if you take one of those three guys out of the equation, we don't get Harry Miller racing. It all falls apart. Those three guys were it. And then what happened was Harry was a genius, but he was a terrible businessman. He went bankrupt two different times, once in 1928, and then he started his business right back up with his name turned around. Instead of H.A. Miller, it was Relima, which is H.A. Miller backwards. He went right back to work as Relima from 1928 to 1932. In 1932, he went bankrupt the final time. The bank seized everything. He lost everything. They sent it to auction, and the guy that bought the building, the machines, the rights, and all the stuff was his head machinist, Fred Offenhauser. And Fred Offenhauser went right back into business building the four-cylinder engines, and Fred Offenhauser went on to big fame, and most of the racing world knows the Offie engine, the Offenhauser engine, but that's Harry Miller's design from like 1917. It's all the same. So back to Zakira's, they were ground zero for the Miller cars. They were restoring them, building them. And I had gotten into building like street legal sprint cars and restoring sprint cars only. No Indy cars at that time, just sprint cars. But anytime I would finish a restoration, I would take it down to Zakira's and like show those guys, like stop it. My dad was doing lettering for him at the time, like on the restorations. So it was the coolest place to go look at because there was Millers there was Duesenbergs there. Zakira's was a cool place. So I would take cars there to kind of show them off. And then in 2010, I got a call from them and they said, hey, we just had a guy that injured his back. He's out. He can't work. We have the 1923 winning Miller here, the Tommy Milton car. It's here. This was February. The car is being restored. It has to be in Indy in 2 months in May. It has to be at Indy finished running. And will you come in and help us thrash and get it done? So naturally, I'm like, oh, yeah. So I go in and see the car. The engine's finished, but it's just like 2 frame rails. Everything was there to build it. And everything was painted, mostly painted, but like no fuel lines, no plumbing, no brake lines, none of that stuff. And Jim, who was the shop foreman, the old Miller expert, Jim Hemmelsbach, he said, here's the deal. If you will come in and help me, as long as you work, as late as you stay, I don't care how late you work, I will stay right here with you and we will get this done if you think we can get it done by May 1st. And of course, me being a hot rodder, I'm like, oh yeah, we can have it done, no problem. So I went in there and thrashed, and we got the car done, driving, ready to go a week before Indy. And we took the car to Indy. I got to drive it there, drive it on the track. I got to run it. The car performed phenomenally. Came back to Cincinnati. Monday, I went back to my shop thinking that was cool. That was a neat experience. And my phone rang. It was Zakira's. And they said, you're not going anywhere. You're coming to work for us. So, and I tried to tell them, like, hey, I got my own thing going. And they're like, we don't care. You're coming to work for us. So I went to work for them. And as it turned out, Jim Hemmelsbach was wanting to retire in 5 years. And his whole plan was to take me on as an apprentice, teach me everything he knew about Millers, and I would take his place. And that's exactly what happened. In 2015, Jim retired, and I took over as the head guy there on the Miller stuff, and it's all I've done since. I stayed there at Zakira's until 2017, but in 2017, Dean, the Linspectors guy, he wanted to sell the company and he wanted to get out of it. So he sold Zakira's, the company, and by this time I had kind of done everything I wanted to do at Zakira's. I wanted to go on my own and do my own thing. And in 2015, I met a girl in Detroit named Jenny, and we started dating. And then a couple years later, we got married, and I moved to Detroit. And
So tell us about that story. This is a story of like you never know what true is like. You were always help running the basement at involved at the Detroit Autorama. They did the extreme whatever, the traditional stuff and vendors and everything. So you had a booth down there usually, right? Selling t-shirts,
yep,
merch and cool stuff. And was she selling beer?
Tequila,
Oh,
straight
okay.
across from us. She was working for Alien Tequila. They had hired her as like a trade booth girl.
Mm-hmm.
And it was funny because she like wasn't there like as a drinker. She was just like presenting tequila, this Alien Tequila. It was a marketing debut.
Yeah.
And she had never been to a car show in her life. Her dad had old cars. Her dad had like drag boats and old car. Her dad was a wild man. I never got to meet him, but we would have been buddies because we were cut from the same cloth. But she had never been to a car show, never nothing. She's told me many times she saw the billboard for the car show, and then she got a text from a modeling agency that she was doing work for, and they said, "Hey, we need girls to come represent Alien Tequila at the Detroit Autorama car show."
So if you guys aren't paying attention, what he's saying, she's a model. So as a history of hot rod builders, pretty much a lot of us has married way out of our league, outkicked your field range or whatever they say. So
100%.
It's a compliment,
yep.
honey.
I agree 100%.
Yeah,
I totally agree. I don't know why or how we do that, but I don't know.
Well, they think we have money because we have hot rods, but we have no money because we have hot rods. Yeah.
Yeah, I was working the basement at the show, and it was you were right. I had helped start the Detroit Autorama Extreme was the basement show, and I had helped Larrabee and those guys start that show. The first 2 years I ran it for them and got it going, and then turned it over to them, let them do it. But then part of that was I would always have a booth down there. And I set up the booth that year with T-shirts and stuff. And you guys know when you're at a trade show, if you tear your booth down before the show's over, you'll get in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
We all know that.
Mm-hmm.
So this was Saturday night at 6:00. I was doing a Pros Pick Award, and I had a trophy to give for the Pros Pick. And it was 6:00. The show goes on until 10. I walked out of my booth, and I walked past the tequila booth, and they were tearing their booth down. And just nonchalantly, I turned to Jenny, and she was gorgeous. And I was like, "Oh, you guys are going to get in trouble for tearing your booth down early." And she looked at me and said, "We're going to get a drink. Do you want to go?" And I said, "Yeah, I do, but I got to go give this award away." And I'm trying to think, like, what do I do here? I'm like, I have to go give this award away on the stage, and I'll be right back. It'll take me about a half hour. If you will wait right here, I will be back, and I'll go have a drink with you. And she's like, "Okay, I'll wait here." And I'm thinking, yeah, right. So I went and gave the award away. And the whole time I'm thinking, you just screwed up. Like, why didn't you bring her to the award? I was nervous. So I gave the award away, walked back over there, and sure enough, she was standing there by herself waiting on me. So we went and had a drink and had dinner and started dating, and that was it. I had a Detroit girlfriend and then a Detroit wife, and now I have a Detroit life. We say Detroit, but we're like an hour and a half northwest of Detroit. We're out in the sticks.
Yeah. We say
it was
Nashville,
awesome.
We're a half hour out of the city in a
It was cool. She when I met her, she had two daughters, Maddie and Anna. Maddie was 10 years old and Anna was a year and a half old. And she had just gotten divorced like a year before. And pretty bad divorce. And both of us we both talk about it. We were both at a point in our lives where we were just tired of the shit, tired of the crap, tired of, what life had done. And the people around us were pulling us in a lot of different directions we weren't real happy with. I was at Zakira's, but I was wanting to go back on my own. I wasn't happy. I wanted to do my own thing. There was just so many things all happening that we were both ready for a change. And we met, we started dating, and the only time we were happy was when we were together. And we started dating, and then we dated for a year and a half. And then after 2 years, we got married. By the time we got married, I had realized that my customers were all over the country. Mm-hmm. Like my customers, didn't matter where I was at. I didn't have to be in Cincinnati. I mean, I have family there. I have mom and dad, sister, friends, everything. But my mom and dad, I'm very close with. But the BSM guys and all that, we were all kind of like trying to settle down and trying to grow up. By this time, we were in our 30s. We were too old to be drinking bottles of Jack Daniel every night and setting things on fire and stuff. So we still were, but we were too old for it. And it was one of the best ways to change your life is to relocate, to get away from it. You talk to people that quit drinking and they'll tell you like the worst thing you can, like people that smoke, if you quit smoking, the worst thing you do is go to a bar because you're around people that smoke. Mm-hmm. So to get away from that, it's hard, but you gotta make serious changes. Mm-hmm. And the saying of you find out who your true friends are when you change your life is very true. You can
speak volumes of that. Yeah.
Oh yeah. There's hot rod buddies that when I changed my life and quit drinking and quit being a jackass, quit being an idiot and got serious and got, straightened my life out. There's buddies that shook my hand and they're like, good for you. It's awesome. And then there's others that were like, quitter, what's your problem? Think you're better than us? It's like, man, no, I'm just trying to live. So it's and then you find out that those guys that show their true colors aren't the ones you wanted to be friends with anyway. So It works out. Yep. It does. It works out.
This is like the truest words that anybody has spoken on this podcast this year. Yeah.
Oh, you got to live it. And it's not an easy lesson to learn, but nobody said all the lessons were going to be easy.
Yeah. So I'm a straight edge kid, so I've never even drank a beer. I've never tasted a beer. Carrie jokes that she got her drinking out of her way in high school.
Yeah.
But like we can speak on we moved away 9 hours away from where we grew up. And other than our like family, I talked to like 4 people from back there, and you talked to maybe
my mom,
your mom, her mom. No.
Yeah. It really opens your eyes up. It changes things. And, and if you're smart, like you guys are, you can use it. It can benefit you in many, many ways. Mm-hmm. It's a reset button, and you can change things about yourself that, like I said, the crabs in a bucket thing is true. People around you will keep pulling you down, keep holding you back. And you got to change things to get away from that. And it worked out. I moved up in here. I moved up to Michigan in 2017, and by marrying Jenny and moving up here, I became a stepdad. And like, I joke that I always knew I would be a good dad, but I'm very fortunate to have an awesome relationship with both my daughters.
That's awesome.
They're awesome girls. They're awesome. It's we still have shared parenting. They still know their dad, but I'm Josh, and it works out. It's worked out really good for both girls because I'm kind of like a third person that they know they can come to me with anything.
Are you like Will Ferrell in that movie Daddy's Home?
Yeah, probably, exactly. It's just it works out. The oldest Maddie, she's a senior in college right now. She's into design and fashion and doing design work like what I do. The youngest is Anna. She's a wild child. Her and Jenny gives us crap because we're like 2 little criminals together around the house. So, but it's awesome. You know, it's I've settled into a very happy life and enjoy it
Awesome.
immensely.
Great.
That's good to hear.
Yep.
It's awesome.
So what are you working on day to day right now?
Still the Miller stuff. I've got several customers that I do Miller work for. The Millers are interesting because they can send me I can do work off of Miller blueprints.
Mhm.
You know, I just built a Miller header, which, you know, a header to most people is a header, but with Miller being Miller, the primary tubes on the header curve two different ways, and they are also tapered as they curve.
Oh,
So, and as you know, you can't put a tapered tube into a mandrel bender.
hmm
So these things I had to make my own tapered tube on a steel mandrel, make my own tapers, hand hammer them, finish them, then pack them with sand and heat bend them with sand the way they did in the 20s. So like a lot of stuff I end up doing, as you know, is I have to do it the old way they did 100 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of my favorite parts of my job is just figuring out how these guys did it 100 years ago. And it never fails with the Miller stuff. We you can have the most high-tech CNC whatever access machines you can imagine,
Mm-hmm.
3D printing machines, all that, and you will still struggle to duplicate what those guys did 100 years ago.
Yeah.
It's mind-blowing what these guys were able to do in the 20s and 30s, and you're just like, how? How did these guys do this with manual machines by hand? It's awesome. I love it. It's like, you know, the guys that can't figure out how Egyptians did stuff. It's the same way with Miller.
Yeah.
You're just trying to figure out how these guys did this 100 years ago, and they did it.
So you're
perfectly
probably the guy
themselves.
we've got on paper a crazy vintage styled AMBR type of car that we almost did it for George Poteet like 15 years ago. We were still living in Illinois and we almost built it for him. But now I've got one of two guys that might pick it up and we want, so you could almost do like an Offie motor or something for us for that, couldn't you?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yep.
If he
I
wants
could.
If he only does it for friends.
I can. Well, yeah, exactly. I can. But what's interesting is maybe 60 to 70% of my work is Miller stuff,
Mhm.
but there's a good 40% of my work right now that is for hot rod shops all over the country. And I end up doing a lot of work on Riddler cars and AMBR cars.
Mhm.
And there's two cars being built right now with Offies in them
Mm-hmm.
that will be debuting the next 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, I think I've
So-
heard about the one. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, and I'm all for it. You know, by all means, let's do another.
Yeah.
But I'm doing right now. I have a customer in California that I've done a bunch of Holobrand conversion and brake conversion, and I'm building all this this front axle from scratch and rear end and wishbones and all this crazy stuff, and it's all for an AMBR car. Which, I mean, as you guys know, one of the things I still smile at is when I was fresh out of college and I was getting ready to go work at a hot rod shop. I wanted to build hot rods. I interviewed with Lobeck. Remember Barry Lobeck?
Mm-hmm.
He was awesome. I interviewed with him to go work for him, and I talked to another shop to go. I even thought about going to work at Alloway's. And what I was told was by Wade Hughes, if you go work for those shops, you're going to learn a lot. You're going to do great and you will learn a lot. But no matter how cool a work you do, it's never going to be Josh Shaw's work. It's going to be Barry Lobeck's work.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you're working for him, he's the guy. He owns the shop, so he gets the credit, and he should.
Mm-hmm.
And Wade's like, just know that going in, because I know you're trying to make a name for yourself in this world. And if you go just work for a hot rod shop, you'll learn a lot, but eventually you're going to have to get out from underneath that. And guys do. Like Barolero is a good example. Barolero learned a ton at Alloway's,
Mm-hmm.
and then he went on his own, and now Barolero boys are building amazing hot rods.
Yeah.
And they're getting them full credit for it. But they built a lot before they ever had their shop.
Yeah.
So,
And they still do some sub work for Bobby too.
oh, they do. I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
But what's funny is now I'm 47 years old, and for the last 8 or 9 years, every year the AMBR cars, there's like at least 2 or 3 of them that I have work on, be it either flame work or I supplied wheels for, or I built axles for. And like, it's funny because now that I'm older, I am like that behind the scenes guy that I don't want the credit. I don't care. I just want the work.
Give me money.
Show me the money. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Did you do the flame? The flames on Mackenzie's pink roadster?
Yeah, and I really wish it would have won.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll state it. I think it should have. I love the car that won. I like even the people, the guys that won. They're great people.
Yeah.
But I think I like Mackenzie's car better, and I'm not just saying that because I was part of it. I knew him. From just a standpoint, I don't know. I think it was a better car. I liked it better, but that's why hot rodding's fun, is we all have different tastes and different looks.
They didn't win the AMBR, but they won the Street Rod of the Year at the Triple Crown, and they've done well with the car. So yeah,
they have, and that, great family. That
excellent.
They're again, I did the flames on her strollers when she was a baby, so
yeah, I've known her since she was just a little nugget, So
that's cool. It's so
hanging
cool
out in their tent, with mom and dad at the Street Rod National, stopping by and visiting with them, and great people.
Cool.
And same with Alan and Angie. We had them on. We interviewed both Alan and Angie last week on the podcast. We had them.
Yeah, that was good. I listened to that. That was great. Yeah. Alan's such a good dude. They're both Alan and Angie. And they were when I got kicked out of Street Rod Nationals, that era. I was friends with them then. Yeah. I knew them then, and it's cool to think back because back then we were all just kids and kids trying to build hot rods and trying to make a name.
Yeah, I still think we are until I look in the mirror. But yeah, one of my buddies that's parts guy has a suspension company. He's one of my dedicated, listens to the new podcast every week and gives me feedback. He goes, "I vote Alan Johnson for the best accent so far on your podcast."
Oh yeah, yep, yeah. He's awesome. He's hilarious. I called down there last week, and you're right. They answer the phone, and I have no idea who I'm talking to. They all have that accent.
Yeah, Charles, awesome. And I always think I'm talking to Shane, and it's Charles, and vice versa. And you hardly ever get Alan when he calls. He don't even answer his cell phone. It's like usually in the other building or something.
No. But they, my work here at home, I've got a shop behind the house in the woods. I do work on, I work on the Millers. I work on hot rods, but then I also maintain vintage race cars for people. Mm-hmm. There's a 1937 Bugatti race car that I keep here for a guy that lives in Milwaukee that I maintain for him. He races it. That's a huge industry that I think a lot of people don't realize exists, that more hot rod shops, I think when they figure out how lucrative maintaining and offering track support for high-end vintage race cars.
Yeah.
When you go to a vintage race, I mean, I tell everyone, hot rod builders, any kind of fabricators, any kind of motorsports guys, I'm like, go to one of the SVRA events or the HHR events, like the big vintage race events, walk through the pits, count the cars. The car count is like 500 to 600 cars there, and then look at the rigs. You'll walk past a pit, and there's like 4 Kenworths lined up, and there's 8 Maseratis and like Cobras, and then there's like NASCARs, there's vintage Indy cars there, there's vintage Monte Carlos there, and there's 20 employees, and that's all one shop that is getting paid to just take care of those race cars and maintain them and keep them race ready for some rich dude that shows up and drives. That's good work.
Yeah,
that's really good work.
And you're working on really cool stuff.
Yeah, and that's, on if you follow my Instagram, you'll see I get to work on really cool stuff, and it's not mine. I don't own it, but I get to work on it. I get to drive it. It just needs. Bobby Green's Duesenberg a couple weeks ago, that was in the Midwest. Now Bobby can work on his own stuff, but that car was on a truck on a tour of the Midwest, and it broke down in Indy, and it had a race 3 weeks later, and they needed it fixed. So I got the call to go get the car, take it to my shop, fix it, repair it, and then get it to the track. And that's all. That's awesome work. It's fun work. I recommend it.
Our
Operating
cats
track
like your
supports
voice.
is everything.
We have a kitten that showed up. We have a, well, he's 8, but he's diabetic now, and we're going back to the doctor again tomorrow. But he keeps hovering around, so he doesn't do that to everybody. So there's like 3 people of all the people we've done, he hovers around. So, but
I'm
you
a cat
also,
guy.
yeah, you have
I
a
see
you
that
have,
cat on the couch a little bit ago.
yeah, and you have a
Oh,
shop
yeah.
cat too, right?
Yeah, so we've got right now there's 2 here. I had my shop cat Adolf for years. He was awesome. He passed away a year and a half ago. Everybody in the hot rodding world that visited my shop knew Adolf. He had a little black mustache right here. He was the ultimate shop cat. He grew up. Wade Hughes, if you've ever been to Wade Hughes' shop, Wade has like 20 or 30 cats running around. There's cats. It's like Dan Webb's shop. There's cats everywhere.
I've
And
never been to Dan Webb's shop. We're going to interview him. You listen to the Ashley and Corey. I was in town when I was filming my TV show, and Dan met me in a parking lot because he wouldn't let me in his shop because he was doing all this top secret Ford shit. So
yeah, Dan's awesome. Dan's like a second dad. You'll have to give him the PG-13 talk though.
yeah. He was on the Roadster Shop and did a very good job. But I
did
wait for a little bit. So yeah, Ashley said she
did.
could get him on. So yeah, Dan, definitely one of my hot rod heroes. So
I went to Wade Hughes' shop, and there was a kitten there that got in my truck and wouldn't get out, and that became my shop cat. And he grew up in the shop. He was one of those cats that like grinders, welders, loud engines wouldn't scare him. He didn't care. He was just the most laid back cat. And he lived to be 17 years old. He passed away a year and a half ago. And now I've got a Siamese cat named Simon that is just taking his place. He's nuts.
Simon gets pretty famous because he shows up on the Cat Rodders Instagram page. Our cat's on the Cat Rodders Instagram page.
Yeah. And as you know, I don't run that. People think I don't. Yeah. Not me.
Yeah.
But
Ashley's the cat running it right now.
I love it. I love it. I like that. I've got a cat here right now that is my oldest Maddie's cat. It's her college cat. She's in town right now, and she's got a cat that's deaf, totally deaf. And it's a white cat. It's got one green eye and one blue eye. And it's the only time I've ever been around a deaf cat. And it's interesting because it'll be sleeping, and if you walk up and pet it, it will jump. You got to like be kind of careful around it. We can't let it out. It's a neat cat, but it also doesn't know how loud it's meowing. So it will, like at 3 a.m, it will like scream meow just because it wants to. So it's a cool cat. But yeah,
I do that when I have a dream about clowns.
Yeah, he does. He screams
I love it. Got the country house up here and animals. We got chickens and lots of deer and turkeys, and there's mountain lion sightings on trail cams and all the good stuff. I like it.
Yeah, awesome. So we've talked for over 2 hours now. Carrie's looking at her clock. So is there anything you want to wrap up here before we end? We touched on a little bit of everything. You also do some vintage IndyCar judging at Indy Motor Speedway. I've seen you've done that before.
Yeah, that was cool. That was Ellen Byerly she was like the curator of the museum, and she dropped my name in a bucket to be a judge there. That was cool. I did that a couple times, but I also got to be careful doing that because it's like Alloway judging some of the shows. Like those are your buddies, and those are your buddies that your coworkers, your people in your industry, and it's easy to it's a fine line to walk.
Yeah.
Because at the 1 year at Indy, I judged a car, and I remember there was 3 guys there that all 3 of them had perfect Indy cars, and I knew whichever 2 I didn't pick, they were going to be upset. And these are grouchy old guys. So I learned my lesson on that. I try not to get wrapped up in that anymore.
And you had to wear a sport coat too, didn't you?
Oh yeah. Yep. That was.
I'm so anti-dress up. I do autocross announcing for Good Guys. They try to make me every year to wear a polo shirt. And I say, if I have to wear the staff polo shirt, I ain't doing it. I'm tapping out. I'll do my other announcing gigs. And so I just get to wear a t-shirt or like
it was a bright yellow polo shirt, but you'll appreciate this deal. that year, that was the 100th Indianapolis 500.
Mhm.
So they had all the vintage cars there. And that week we had a show and I judged for the show. And then Sunday for race day, they had like 70 vintage Indy cars there,
Mhm.
and they wanted them all to run on the track. So Indy put the word out, and they got every car had to have 2 mechanics with it and a famous driver. So I got assigned the Eddie Rickenbacker winner from like 19, I think like 1913 or 14, right in there. And Johnny Rutherford was the driver, which was cool because I knew Rutherford. He's a neat guy, easy to work with. But the deal is I had to be there at like, I think I had to be there at 8 a.m. in the morning. Well, we were racing the little 500 the night before in Anderson with uh, the Hoffman sprint car. So I left, went to the race in the little 500. That's the one sprint car race that we do pit stops at, and I'm the fuel guy there. I've got this like huge fuel, like a IndyCar pit stop. We ended up winning the race. We won the little 500. We're there till like 2 in the morning. We're in Anderson, Indiana. I drove home from Anderson, Indiana to my shop, got home at 4 a.m., slept for an hour, got up at 6, jumped in my S10, threw my BMX bike in the bed of my S10 because I knew I wasn't going to be able to park anywhere near Indy because everyone told me they're like, you can't park anywhere near the racetrack on race day. So I drove to Indy. I parked like 4 or 5 miles away. I started hitting like full yards, parked the S10, got on my BMX bike, rode like 5 miles in with my polo shirt. rode in, got there, like locked my BMX bike up to the fence by the pits, crewed on the car. We fired the car off. I had never been to the actual Indy 500 race. I've never stayed for the race. I like I like all the vintage stuff, but the race didn't really, it interests me, but the crowd was just a lot. But I thought, you know what, I should stay for it and see. So I got my BMX bike and my polo shirt, and I stayed around and I saw the pre-race festivities, and I was down in turn 1. I didn't have a seat, so I was in turn 1 by the infield. And they threw the green. I watched the field come through turn 1, take the green. And by the time the field got back around to the front straightaway, I was outside on 16th Street on my BMX bike, riding to my truck and rode out of there. So my BMX bike saved me that day, got me back to my truck, and I went home and slept for about 2 days.
We used to have we first started coming from Illinois, so 27 years or something. We'd always park in the same people's yard at the edge of town, and then we walk in, but it wasn't that far. And then this one guy, well, that was the one we parked clear out at the edge by the hotel, by the exit. That one guy, he was a local, and that's what he would do every year. He just park out there and ride his bike in. Then at the end, I get out and beat the traffic. So yeah.
Oh yeah, that worked good. That good deal. And then, the vintage BMX bikes is a whole nother thing. So
yeah, we didn't even touch on that. He's got vintage BMX stuff too. Everybody knows we're BMX nerds, so
got lots of them. I was smart enough to buy them before they got crazy.
Yeah, I just collect mostly just Patterson stuff. Even though I'm trying to buy a Skyway TA from the guys at Classic Car Studio. You've heard about this, you just don't listen. And I would like a JMC in my collection, but I mostly just collect Patterson stuff. I got helmets and jerseys and pants. And I don't
blame you a bit. No, man, that's it. It was an honor to be on here with you guys and remember all this stuff. So I appreciate it.
Yep. Well, thanks for being on. Like I say, we got more to talk about, and he's doing stuff. So in the future, we'll probably get a part 2 with Josh Shaw. And by that time, I'll show everybody my shirt that he drew for me.
Yeah, right.
So.
Deal. I like that deal. Now you got to send me all the information on it. Thank you, guys.
So tell everybody real quick where they can find you on social media.
Instagram's the only thing I do. I threw away Facebook. That got too out of hand for me. Instagram is Jacobs Ladder. Just type in Jacobs_ladder and you'll find me.
I think if they type your name in, it comes up too, I think.
Yeah, it does. I post a lot of my work on there. I've got 2 or 3 customers that don't allow me to post the Miller work and like the AMBR stuff on there.
Yeah.
Sometimes you'll see I'll start working on a project and then I'll never post the finished product. That's what's going on.
Yeah.
If you wonder,
I have a collector that I can't post. Pretty much my guy that I've worked for 4 years, I can't post anything.
Yeah. So if you see me working on something and it just mysteriously stops, that's usually what's going on. But watch my Instagram. If you're familiar with Instagram, watch my story. I post a lot more stuff on my story because it's like step by step of how I do a lot of the processes that we do that are like 100-year-old processes and whatnot. So, and just anything neat that I'm into.
Very cool. Well, thanks for taking the time to doing this. And thanks to your wife, Jenny, for setting it up before we recorded. She was there. And
she's the smart one of the bunch.
Yeah, she went to bed. She probably got headphones or earplugs in. So I want to thank Josh Shaw for taking the time to be on the Strange Motion Way podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
The Strange Motion Way podcast, brought to you by Royal Purple Synthetic Oils.
Royal Purple premium synthetic motor oils and high-performance chemicals have been designed to improve performance in all conditions and provide cleaner operation, better mileage, and decreased oil change frequency. That means less oil changes. With products available for your gasoline and diesel engines, Royal Purple is the obvious choice for your performance needs. Drive with Royal Purple, the synthetic expert.